Let's go ahead and get started. Today is June
Okay.
12th, 2012. We are here with the Voicing in Action Project through the Social Justice Institute, Case Western Reserve. And we are with Miss Jane B. Sheats. Good afternoon, Miss Sheats.
Good afternoon,
We're going to
Brandon.
go ahead and start the interview. Tell me about yourself and your family and the history of yourself and family.
I'm one of the few native Clevelanders. You don't find too many of them. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, born on 79th and Quincy. I'm married, my childhood sweetheart. We have 3 grown daughters. My husband is deceased. He was deceased in 1995. I have 7 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild that's just a year old.
And how did your family come to wind up in Cleveland?
My grandmother was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and most of their family was still in Atlanta, Georgia. She brought my mother here when she was 6 months old.
Okay.
So they all, like most native Clevelanders, ended up in the 70s off of Central, 71st off of Central across from Giddings School. You've probably heard that name because Carl and Lou Stokes went to Giddings. And that's where I pretty much was grown up. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 9 months old. My mother died when I was 7. It was during the Depression. My father had a congenital heart ailment and was not supposed to live when he was born, but he lived to be 27 years old. My mother, during the Depression, caught, I'm trying to think of what they called it. Neither one of them, according to my doctor, should have died. But it was during the Depression. Medicine was expensive and hard to get. So he died when I was 9 months. She died when I was 7. My grandmother raised me. The rest of my family, all the aunts and uncles, and lived to be 90 and 100. Those are the only 2 that in my childhood died.
Wow. Now, is that at 9 months and 7 months, or 9 years and 7 years?
What?
That they died.
No, I was 7 years when my mother died.
7 years and 9
But
months.
months when my father died. My aunt tells the story of how they took me to see him, and I hadn't said a word, and they put me on the bed, and I crawled all over him saying, "Dada." And she said the nurses and doctors were all falling apart because they knew that he wasn't going to live, and they had the technology they had now. He was born exactly 11 months between his sister. She was born in January, he was born in December, so the heart was too weak.
Okay. Now, as it relates to East Cleveland, when did you move to East Cleveland or start your involvement with East Cleveland?
I've always, and that's what I've had to clarify to East Clevelanders, I bought a house, me and my husband bought a house on 124th and Superior when we were 22 years old. At that time, very few blacks were on those streets. They didn't know anything past Lakeview. All the blacks were from Lakeview West. I wanted a new house, and I told my husband for 1 year, my paycheck went in the bank so we could get a house. And we wanted a house in Warrensville because that's where the new houses were being built. But it just so happened I was working for Veterans Administration. And every time a new set of plans would come in, I'd run and say, how are these? How are these? And they'd say, "No, Jane, they're not any good." And I got tired because I wanted a house, and because we'd never had a house. So finally I told my husband, let's just find a house. And there was a realtor on the corner of Lakeview and Superior. And Cleveland Trust Bank was there. And we went in and told her we wanted a house. And she took us to 124th and found this colonial. The neighborhood at that time was just beautiful. fruit trees, no fences, and the couple, the old Italian couple that owned it, just thought it was the cutest thing that we at 22 were buying a house. So they wouldn't even let anybody else see it. And we moved there in 1955. And all three of our children were born and raised there. East Cleveland at the time, once I became political, I was always in East Cleveland sharing information about the Board of Election, going there when there was a problem with the Board of Election, knew everybody in council, was very close to May Stewart. Her and I were, she was manager, city manager. At that time, that was the form of government East Cleveland had. At the same time, I was chairman of the Board of Election. So we shared television time sometime, speeches. We became very close then.
Okay. Just to officially put the question there, that was pretty much a good lead into it. Can you think back to your earliest memories of East Cleveland and tell us what life was like then?
It breaks your heart when you think about it. East Cleveland, to show you how fearful people that wanted to do wrong were of East Cleveland during the riot, during the Glenville riot, the East Cleveland police sat on 125th, and the rioters burned and destroyed everything they could from 125th West. My house, I made lemonade and stuff for the young men that had to guard, that came to guard the area, because they went to the stores at that time. Superior, 124th to Lakeview had dime store, grocery store, Furrier, the antique store that's on the corner of Mayfield and what is that street, Coventry. That was over there. You didn't have to go anywhere for anything. Everything was furniture store. And during the riot, the kids went in the dime store, and the kids that lived in the apartments. My kids didn't understand why they couldn't go. The National Guard, I fed them, gave them lemonade and stuff, because Judge Adams was the judge in East Cleveland, and they not a match went over into 125th. That's the reputation. The reputation in East Cleveland is don't go over there acting crazy, because his fines were very strict and they knew it. I knew several of the councilmen. Willie Pace and I shared time at the Glenville YMCA. I was the chairman of the board at the YMCA. He was the director. He was a councilman in East Cleveland.
Wow. That's saying a lot of East Cleveland. We've heard a lot of stories on not just the police, but also the civil service. And a lot of the East Cleveland was more of a community back then.
Houses were nice, streets were nice. It was totally different than it is now.
Along those lines, what would you say would be some of your fondest memories of East Cleveland?
I think the park system. Each year, my family, we have a picnic in the park that's right around from where I now live. And I think the park system by the pond, I used to go there to exercise. Neela Park's display, Christmas display, everybody looks forward to that.
Okay. In what ways has the city changed over time, and what do you think contributed to those changes?
I have a lot to say about that. Having been in politics as long as I have, I've learned a couple things, and I think the main ingredient, and I've shared this with everyone, including the present administration. In politics, there's a thing called compromise. And I haven't seen that happen for many, many years. In a political setting, anything that has to be decided is voted on. First of all, having chaired many boards in my life, Nothing should be discussed in a board meeting. Anything that needs discussion is sent to committee. The committee hammers it out, brings it back to the board. The board doesn't like it, they send it back to committee until it comes and is accepted. I tried to share with them being on the AAA board. The AAA board, we built a multi-million-dollar facility in Independence. The last meeting, and this board has true professionals. The last board meeting before we moved in, we met, everything was approved. There was one question. One of the guys questioned why we were borrowing money when we had money. Our finance guy explained the reason. We voted on it and it was over. In all the meetings I've seen in East Cleveland, it's always a discussion and a fight. And the part that really, truly bothers me when I do see it on television, because I don't have East Cleveland cable, is the negative conversation, and I had mentioned it to the former president, council president, why do you let them go on like that? And she said to me that, you know, you have to let them talk. I said, but when they're not talking on what's on the table, you can rule them out of order. That never should happen. And what's dangerous about that is that people from up on the hill that would come down and probably participate or run for office, they'll never do that as long as that climate is there, because there's no professionalism, none. You say whatever you think, you discuss things that should have been discussed in committee, and until that changes, it's never going to work. And I've said that to everyone that'll listen. If they're listening. I don't think any of them are listening. It's just not, and they're all good people. That's what bothers me. They're all, each one of the council people is a good person, an intelligent person, and why that can't change, I don't know.
It's interesting you would say that. Other notable political people have commented on it as well. And how has that changed over the years? How has the government changed? We talked to Mr. Charles Bibbs, and he was saying how it was a city manager, and then at 85 it went to mayor government. Now, did that have some effect on?
It shouldn't have, but it's, and speaking of Mr. Bibbs, he's part of the reason. And I don't mind saying it because I've said it to him. I'm on the library board, and when we had to close 3 branches of the East Cleveland Library, all of us cried because it was at Christmas time and we didn't know that we didn't have any money. Had the library stayed open 1 day longer, nobody would have got paid. In fact, it was so hurtful that my doctor wrote me a letter. He told me, then he finally put it in writing. He said, I know how conscientious you are, Jane, but you need to get off of that board, because it was really getting me down. Because the day that we had to close, just before Christmas, Charlie Bibbs attempted to conduct a meeting, and he invited the governor, the Secretary of State, and everybody. And I called him personally, and I said, Charlie, why didn't you call me and ask me what was going on? Why did you do that? I said, you know everybody on that board, and you certainly we could have told you, because all of us, you know, have a heart, and there's no way we would have wanted to close the library just before Christmas. It created, and as you know, they finally ended up selling 2 branches. And so Mr. Bibbs was part of that problem.
Okay. What other ways has the city changed over time?
I don't know what we're going to do to change our reputation. Way back in the 70s or 80s, it was before 83, I had to go there for community development. At the time, I was employed by community development, and I was the monitor for the HUD program. And I had to go to 33 cities to find out what the mayor wanted with his HUD funds. And one white guy was supposed to go with me, and we had to go to East Cleveland. And you would have thought we were going to hell. He said, "Oh, Jane, are you going with me?" And I said, "Yeah." He was scared to death because of the reputation. And that's still the reputation that most people have of East Cleveland. And when he came to East Cleveland, we went to city council. At the time, that city council was defective too. I told him what each council person was going to do, and I'll be doggone if they didn't do everything I told him they were going to do. And to balance it out, I took him up to see, you probably remember Bob Johnson, lived in Crystal Tower. He had a laid out pad in Crystal Tower. And I said, "Come on, go with me up to my friends and see his house." And when he went up there, it took his breath. He said, because what he knew about East Cleveland and what he was looking at just didn't add up. And I told him, that's a lot of that in East Cleveland. You're just going by the reputation. And I don't know how we'll ever get that reputation out. I think we almost did it last year. But changing the reputation of East Cleveland is going to be a major job.
Wow, that's interesting to hear that the government has pretty much stayed the same. So they've been arguing even before Omaze?
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't mean to say, I hope that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. They and I think the main point is those council meetings where they're discussing things. Anything that comes up that isn't agreed on should be sent to committee. The chairman should say, "We haven't agreed with this. We'll send it back to committee. You all work it out." Nothing in any meeting should be discussed in the meeting. It's sent to a committee, either a standing committee or a one-time ad hoc committee. And anybody that's serious in board membership and been in any decent boards knows that. But they discuss it, and I've tried to even my former church tell them that. You don't, and reading the AAA board, I mean, you can't wait to get to the meeting, because you have first of all, you get your packet ahead of time. So you know what the meeting is going to consist of. You know if you have some questions. And they go down line item 1, and they'll state what it is. And then somebody will say, "So moved," and somebody else say second. End of it. Motion carried. Line item 2, you have an entire meeting and lunch in 2 hours. If there's any questions, the questions are answered, and you go on to the next line item. If it's something that needed to be read, you read it. If it needs to be discussed, it's sent to committee. And you just can't get people to understand that. And once they get to that,
I'm on enough committees, I can certainly concur with the AAA thing. Next question. How has race and racism impacted you personally, and how has it impacted and affected the city of East Cleveland?
Unfortunately, and I'll be 80 in November, I don't think racism in its entirety will ever leave us. It just won't. In Cleveland, and I've told people this because they said, "You've always had good jobs," but what they don't know is that my very first job, when I graduated from John Hay, I was to go on to college, 1951. And I ended up working at Internal Revenue. You would have thought I worked for the president. My grandmother and them, "Oh, Jane works for Internal Revenue." I never worked at McDonald's. My first job was Internal Revenue. I was there 3 years, and I got a promotion each year. But they don't know is that John Hay graduates at the time, if you applied for a job and said you graduated from John Hay, they didn't even test you, because John Hay was like the penitentiary. I mean, you did everything to the extreme. You had to type, shorthand, bookkeeping, a whole year of filing. Now, how much you need to know about filing? A whole year. Typing, you take Cleveland out and put Ohio in and not be able to see it. So you were perfectionist. The first attempt I made for a job, I went to May Company, and sitting there was a girl that had just come in from Germany and went to John Hay and graduated. And she was in the office typing. When I went there to apply, they said they didn't have any openings in the office. And I said, "You don't have anything in this whole," it was summer, You don't have anything in this whole May company? And she said, no. The only thing we have is bus girl in the employees' cafeteria. Well, I'm standing there, little skinny thing, long nails, high heel shoes, hair down my back. She just knew I wasn't going to take it. I said, I'll take it. And it shocked her to death. She sent me up to the kitchen. They treated me like a China doll. They had to wrap the uniform around me twice to make it fit, because all the people there were foreigners, heavy foreigners. But after she saw, because I changed everything, I changed how they did everything to make it, you know, and she said, you are really smart. So when Internal Revenue called me in November, she said, if you'll just stay through Christmas, because my job was to take the dirty dishes off the table, put them in a cart, and take them to the kitchen. And those big ladies, they fed me because they said I was too skinny. They'd give me half of the food. And I had organized everything because that's my strength. And she said, if you will just stay through Christmas, I promise you that I'll put you in the office. I said, no, I have to. Internal Revenue called me, I have to go. So that racism, the other job I was supposed to get was a dressograph, multigraph. And I interviewed with the owner. He liked me, was going to hire me. He hired me immediately. He says, oh yeah, he said, whatever machine it was, he couldn't find anybody that knew how to operate it. But since you graduated from John Hay and you had a dressograph and multigraph and you can type, and I'll hire you. And he's grinning the whole time. I'll hire you and I'll train you, and this is your lunch hour and this is your vacation. He hired me. He didn't say, I'll let you know. He said, you're hired. And when I left, I was supposed to go to Cincinnati with the family, but he wanted me to start that Monday. And when I got home, he called me and told me he was sorry that somebody came in that knew how to operate the machine. And then I remembered that the whole time he was interviewing me, the other ladies, the older white ladies, were coming looking in. And when I left, they probably went up one side of him and down the other. So people don't know, it was more subtle then. See, now I could have sued him because he didn't tell me, he let me know. He told me I was hired, just grinning. You'll start work Monday and this is what you're going to get paid, and you're going to have vacation, and you're going to, and that happens all the time. It happens all the time. Only now we can take care of it.
In terms of politics in the city of East Cleveland, has race or racism had any impact?
I don't think we have enough white to, although there's still quite a few. I see still, and up on the hill there are quite a few. Up in that Rockefeller part, there's still quite a few up in those better homes. And I think, and that's why I really pray that they'll get their thing together. Because if they get the, council and stuff together, they'll come down and participate. But I don't go near city council. Since I've been in East Cleveland, I don't go near it because there's too much negativity. And since I know I have an opinion, I know I would be trying to share it. And it's useless. It's useless. So I just stay away from it if I can. I support the mayor. I support the ward leader. I support all of them. All of them I like. They're all my friends. But I don't go near it because I don't approve of what's going on. If I wasn't so old, I'd run myself and show them how it's done.
Okay, here we go. How has inequality impacted you personally? How has it impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Personally, it's really funny. I guess I'm such a strong spirit. I don't let it impact me. I was just telling a young lady that's in government now, has a beautiful job, multi-degree. I said, I guess what has got me through is I have never, ever felt that anybody was better than me. I don't have a degree because I, on the way to college, stopped at Internal Revenue and never got there. But I've been in college for everything else. I have a real estate license. I had an appraisal license. Anything I was doing at the time, I go back to college to take some courses for it. Wanted to go ahead and get a degree, and at one point I went to Columbia there on Erie, whatever that college was there, where they give you credit for your life experiences and tell you how much college material time you needed to get the degree. And I had enough to get, with 1 year, I had enough to get a degree in political science. With the Board of Election and all that behind me, I had all executive type jobs. I could have got a degree with 1 year study in political science, but I wanted it in social work. I've always wanted to be a social worker or a lawyer. But I had enough to have a degree in political science and have had people under me with master's degrees that weren't too smart.
Okay, well, good deal.
So it never affected, when I saw it trying to affect me, I stopped it.
Okay. Now, inequality, racism, and thinking back when East Cleveland went through the white flight, right? So as the city changed or became more colored, how do you think racism or inequality affected the city in general with businesses, government?
They won't come in. When the mayor was, I don't think it was the present mayor, I think it was the former mayor that said they were trying to get a hotel to come into the Windermere site. And in the real world, that would be ideal, to have a hotel right there where people coming in to take care of business, just like the airport hotel, could come in, be right at the Rapid, take care of their business, go back, would be ideal. But I told them when they had the meeting, in fact, me and Miss Brewer had a couple words about it. I said, nothing will ever come in here as long as city council is the way it is. Because they're not going to be involved in dog fights. They're just not going to do it. You know, when you all get it together where you'll be professional and not talk about each other's mama, they'll come in. And I've told them, you're bound to not get along with a certain member of whatever you're in. But you keep those fights, and that's something I've tried to share with all the council people. The stuff that goes on it's in city council, in you all's meetings and stuff, should be kept there. John Q. Citizen doesn't need to know. They don't need to know. At least I don't want to know.
Can you recollect a memory or an instance when the community fought for something?
No, I can't. I cannot. And I knew, like I said, I knew all of them even way back then when May was city manager. In fact, one of the, Danny Peacock, he goes by another name now, when I was at the Board of Election, he was running for something, I don't know what it was. And he had his petitions filled out. He had them going out getting signatures. And he sent the girl to the Board of Election to have them checked. And she didn't quite understand, and she filed them. Now there's some city council, if you file and you don't have enough, you know, you can go back and get subsequent signatures. That particular office you couldn't. Once you filed them, that was it. I've never seen a grown man cry. They would not undo it. They would not undo it. So, but I can't think of anything they've ever fought for.
And collectively as a city?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
The water, I think they did. They fought about Cleveland, you know, getting the water taken over by the city of Cleveland.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can remember.
How have the surrounding institutions and cities impacted the city of East Cleveland?
I got a spark of comfort when the mayor was able to broker the deal with those apartments. That really made me feel good, and I thought we were getting there, because it was a collaboration for the first time between East Cleveland, Cleveland University Circle, and what is it, the Fitch group. That warmed my heart. if we can get more of that, that was wonderful. And that was the first time that really made me think we were getting there.
Okay. Over the years, like say, let's go back maybe to the 60s or coming through to before that. How have businesses, institutions, whether it's Case, University, hospitals, Cleveland Clinic, or GE, Cleveland Heights, Cleveland, how would you say they have impacted the city of East Cleveland over the years, if anything at all?
Yes, they did. The hospitals did. Huron Road certainly did. The problem with Huron Road was not unique. And I did everything I could to protest. I marched. I went to Washington with them. I did. But it was a done deal. And I told most of the people after it was over, because I didn't want to rain on anybody's parade, all business people, I don't care who they are, their thing is, what is the bottom line? Is it profitable? There's no reason to be in business if you don't make a profit. And Cleveland Clinic, like Kevin Conwell pointed out, that was in the plan, in their 5-year plan. When we were doing all the research and found out that the average trauma victim was $7,000, and the average trauma victim didn't have insurance. And then, certainly when they had 7 trauma doctors, and then 6, and then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, how were they? Now, I had 2 things I wanted to share with them. In fact, I did, I think. One, take it to 95th and Euclid. But there again, I mean, you don't want trauma out here, you don't want to do anything with Huron, fine, close it. But take it down to 95th and Euclid. You know they're not going to do that. They're not going to have trauma down there. But there again, going back to what I said previously, it wasn't paying. It was not paying. When you don't have a trauma doctor, you can't very well have a trauma center. That was very clear to me. I know our Congresswoman got a lot of slack because she didn't support it. I think she could have kind of smoothed it a little, pretend like she was, but they all knew it was a done deal, only because it was not profitable. I did a lot of research on how Dennis Kucinich saved the hospital on Broadway. And he did all the song and dance and everything. They saved it, they put money in it. 5 years later, they did just what they wanted to do before, tore it down. So it was, you know, you have to be practical. I also told them when we went over to protest, when those Cleveland Clinic executives looked out and saw 4 gray-haired women, 2 gray-haired men, 1 boy, 1 young boy, that meant nothing to them. That meant nothing to them. You can fight big business, but you have to be early and you have to have some money. And we didn't have either. We didn't do either. We didn't hit it soon enough, and we didn't have no money to fight it. So.
And when you say not unique, you're speaking in terms of
businesses
or in terms of hospitals?
Both. Mount Sinai, and I didn't get involved in Mount Sinai, so I don't know what was the criteria for them closing, because I didn't really follow that. But now what I think they should have done is put the money in Huron that they put in Hillcrest. But since too many non-insured people were coming to Huron, that's what made the big difference. And I heard way before it happened that Hillcrest said they weren't taking them, and sure enough, most of them are being sent to Metro, which is already overcrowded, But any business, I don't care what it is, the bottom line is it profitable? If it's not profitable, we're not going to do it. That's why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You know, so we could have talked till we got blue in the face. I didn't like the fact that they told us at that last meeting that they hadn't made the decision, and they had. You know, that was when Travell talked to the doctor that night at that community meeting, and he asked when they were going to close it, and he said they were still studying it. I didn't like that, because that was a lie. they had already made the decision. But they made the decision 5 years ago. It just came to fruition, you know.
So you've looked at hospitals like across the country that were closing and going through the same problems business-wise.
Business, period. I was involved last week with this Stay in Cleveland group. Are you familiar with them? They're trying to, you'd be excellent in that group. It's trying to keep young professionals in Cleveland. And the head of it is Reverend Sadler's son, Paul Sadler. And they are trying to decide, is Cleveland good enough for them to stay here with their talents and education? And they had Lou Stokes, not this last time, but the time before that. But the last little thing they had Terry Tarantino, that has an Italian restaurant in Little Italy and on 4th Street. And he said they're suffering downtown. He said all of them are hanging on by their nails. And they asked if the casino was going to make a difference. He said no. He said when the people leave the casino, they're going to be tired and broke. And they're not. And if they're going to eat, they're going to go to the buffet there. He said they're not coming on 4th to my restaurant. So he said we just have to do the best we can, you know, trying to hang on with what we have, because everybody's suffering. You know, the hospitals are just one of them.
Okay. The reason I went there, we'll probably have to strike this, is when we were going through that as a city, I actually did some research, and I saw that big hospitals were condensing. So, you know, remember how Cleveland Clinic and UH started condensing all the hospitals? And what this study showed is that after they condensed enough of them, then they put those 5-year plans together. They start shutting them, and in most cities, they just left the building. So I was, you know, I'm a Gary supporter anyway. I was trying to convey to people what had been going on around the country and how the fact that Gary got, even if he just got $1 and the building torn down, that we were way ahead of so many other cities that they just pulled out.
I told him that too. I told him that. I said, Gary, I said, I don't know what you had to do to broker that deal, and I don't care. Because the hospital on Broadway, Cleveland, Mount Sinai, St. Luke's, they all went down and they didn't get anything. So I don't care what you had to do. If you had to sell your soul, the fact that you did get something. Yeah, I said the same thing. Because I try to convey to them that I try not to be so blind that I like you regardless. You know, I told Gary, I said, I like what you're doing. When I don't like what you're doing, I'll tell you that. But the fact that he was able to make that deal, regardless of what he had to do to make it, pleased me. Because like you say, we got some money. Now there'll be a fight over what to do with it.
Okay, let's go on. What is your vision for the future of East Cleveland? Tell me about major issues that need addressing in order to better our neighborhood, our community, and our city.
One thing that bothers me is there's 2 sinkholes across from the shopping center by Burger King, full of dirty water. Been there a couple of years, and I've told everybody about it. The property belongs to Coney's. I mentioned it to Coney, and they said they were going to try to. Nobody's doing anything about it. They should be fined. They should be made to fill it in, cement it. Oh, the guy told me that, because they were lottery agents. And you know, I retired as the manager of the Cleveland office for the lottery. So I knew them. And I said, you better do something about that, because the community they didn't pay any attention to me, because nobody in City Hall is making them do something about it. And with the mosquito problems and Nile virus and all the problems, somebody, and I'm tired of even talking about it, 2 bodies of water right there in that parking lot. I used to get on them about those dirty storefronts past Taylor. All those stores trash piled up this deep in the doorways. And since that's where I started in community, you know, making apartment owners and store owners do what they're supposed to do, every time I'd pass there, I'd get mad. Because if I had the responsibility, they would have done something or been cited. Because that's what's missing. When you cite them, when I talked to the Department of Woods about our apartment, he said they cite them, and when you hit them in the pocket, they stop doing what they're doing. You know.
Okay. How about any other issues, or do you see any issues with regards to school system, housing, businesses, families, kids, sports?
The school system in East Cleveland, I think, is okay. The fact that the mayor sends his children there is admirable. I tell my grandchildren, good students come out ahead, don't care what school they go to, because you do things after school. They're never now, with schools being short of money and short of books and short of everything. It's what you do after school. You know, going to the library, studying. A good student, look at the young man that just got the scholarship to Harvard, sleeping on benches and going down to Tower City. Did you read it?
No.
You didn't? His name is Walker, I think. He graduated and he was homeless. And he would go to Tower City and sleep. He'd sleep on the park benches and things and study. And he got a scholarship to Harvard. Got accepted in several colleges. And if you want it, don't care what school you go to, you can get it.
That's good news. I haven't heard anything about
that was such a beautiful story.
Okay.
Young kid.
Here's our last published question. What would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better?
I'm at the point now where you've heard me say this, all I run now is my mouth. I'm as far as organizing and planning, I'm hard to beat. That's a God-given talent. I can plan anything. And I do a lot of counseling with elected officials. And at one while, I tried to charge for it because they all come to me. They all come to me because having been in politics as long as I have, 50-some years, and I've been on every level. I played with the big boys at the Board of Election. You know, I was on the board with Gare Foley and Bob Hughes, and I was with George Forbes every day. George Forbes was at my house 9 days a week, and there's not but 7. So I've seen politics from up here and down here, and I know what works. And having integrity, if you can't, if you're in, and I say this all the time, if it's someone that you don't like, you don't have to be chummy with them, you just have to work with them. And that's what East Cleveland's got to learn. You don't have to like anybody that you work. Tony Garofoli, when I was on the Board of Election, because I was a novelty. First woman, first black, didn't have a lawyer's license, but he didn't know what to do with me. He had 2 licenses. He was licensed to practice law in Florida and Ohio. And he didn't know what to do with me. Because I was positive, I dealt with facts. I had to, and I think you asked that question earlier, I had to fight for respect. But once they are around you for a while, they catch it. The nightly news, when I chaired the board, and I chaired the board for 4 years, every time there was a hearing, after the hearing, they'd ask Bob Hughes questions, Tony Garofoli questions. They never asked me anything. So I trained the people under me, don't say anything you can't say with a smile. So I walked up to Paula Slimek one day and I said, is there a reason why you never asked me any questions? She said, oh, I wasn't aware. I said, well, I am. So she waited. We had a hearing with the U.S. Labor Party accusing Democrats of voting from vacant lots and buildings. And I mean, the attorneys, and the room was packed. And she came up to me And Mrs. Sheats, what do you think about so and so and so? And I gave her a half-hour answer. She almost fell out. When you see me someplace, I'm not a token. Whatever we are doing, I'm gonna know about it. Another hearing I had, a lawyer was arguing a point, and I said, I'm sorry, sir, but that law has been changed. And the lawyer for the Board of Election was trying to make his way up there to tell me that. He said, oh, Ms. Sheats, I was so proud of you. I said, I'm sorry, sir. I said, that law. They said, Bob Hughes said, get that on my desk right. He didn't even know, because I study hard. I make sure that if there's a hearing coming up that's going to be big, because we had the lottery scandal, we had Dickerson scandal, we had all kind of scandals and things when I was on there. And I would study it. I would listen to the TV accounts of it, the radio accounts of it. If I met you or went to lunch with you, I'd say, what do you think about it? So when I sat up there chairing that board, I knew what I was doing. I wasn't just up there trying to be a cute face. So, and contrary to other people that sat on the board that said, well, I leave that up to the big boys. I don't leave nothing up to the big boys. I'm going to know what I'm doing because I'm more comfortable. And we had an attorney that sat with us. But very seldom did I have to have him give me advice because I had studied it. While I was on the board, Arthur Woods dried up the Playhouse and the Lancer doing a local option. She didn't call me, and local options at that time, you had to do 3 contiguous precincts, and they were trying to get rid of Winston. So they did a local option, picked the precincts, and just happened to be the precinct that the Playhouse and the Lancer were in. And oh my God, she called me that night, she said, Jane, the Playhouse and the Lancer is dried up. Nothing we can do. We had hearings for I don't know how long before Morris Jackson was able to find a way to get them back wet again.
That is a heck of a story because that's before my time, but I've always heard these great stories about Winston, and someone actually showed me a picture. He was on the corner of Euclid and Mayfield.
No, he had all that stuff on 105th and Euclid.
105th and Euclid was all his, but the picture they showed me was something on something on Euclid and Mayfield.
Now he has apartments, and people don't even know they're his. They thought, I don't know what Winston's doing now, but they thought he was the maintenance man, and he owned them.
I heard he was a heck of a guy and did a lot for black entrepreneurship around the city.
But that was, and Tony Garofoli tried to throw us under the bus. I'm sitting there at the hearing, and we had the hearing and told him there's nothing we can do. The Lancer, I forgot her name, she came and I said, there's nothing we can do. It was an election, and it won. It dried him up. And we had another hearing, and I look out there and I see her. And after the hearing, I told her the same thing, and then I said, when it's over, meet me in my office. So they all went in the office, and they had their lawyer with them. I said, when you came last time, we told you there's nothing we can do. He said, Jane, don't pay any attention to what she's saying. Tony Garofoli told them to come, and he wasn't there.
At this time, was George the owner of Lancer, or someone else was the owner at that point?
Carson was the owner, I think, at that time.
Okay.
John Carson, I think, was the owner.
John Carson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then George was also a lottery agent, so I knew him already.
Oh, is that how he got his start?
Yeah.
He's a lottery agent.
Uh-huh. He sold lottery.
Okay. Okay. Well, before we're done, I'd love to hear more about your book. I mean, this interview, we're pretty much done with this, but I understand that
we're trying to get the book.
Wanted to see where your progress was on that.
You know, I started it, and I was working hard on it. I don't do anything without being prompted, and you'll appreciate this, by the Holy Spirit. If I get an idea to do something, I'll know when it's time to do it. And I think one of my friends was saying, well, how do you know that the Holy Spirit? Because I've been doing it for years. I've been doing it for years. I'll say, I want to do so-and-so, and then it will tell me. It won't tell me not to, but if it doesn't tell me to, I just kind of leave it alone. And I think it's going to work out now. I don't think it's going to, I know it's not going to happen this year. I know it's not going to happen. I have enough to do it and I can finish it this year. But the Holy Spirit, because I think there's something else going to be happening. And it seems to be happening quickly now with the Obama call. And I tell the people that are trying to get somewhere, if you do a good job, you'll come to somebody's attention. And when I was asked if I was going to be on the conference call, I wasn't sure because I had graduation at the university school, and I wasn't sure what day it was. So I told them I didn't know if I could even be on the call. So when I did tell them that I could be on the call, they also need to know something about you. So I'm sure what they picked up on was the chairmanship of the Board of Election. So the next call I got was, would you be the one to introduce the First Lady? So I said, yeah. So that causes confusion because there's 99 other people that think they should have been the one to introduce the First Lady. And I did get a call from one individual that said they listened to the call and they had some questions they wanted to ask, and because I was so long-winded, they didn't get a chance to ask the questions, knowing full well that in politics you don't do anything off the cuff. That was all scripted. They knew what I was going to say, how I was going to say it. The questions were scripted. They knew what questions, you know. So, but our minister says you have to have at least one hater that keeps you on your knees. But I see something coming. In fact, I got a call yesterday to see if I would handle the media the day he comes at Shaker. They wanted me. I said no. I said because right now I'm trying to take care of my granddaughter's absence, and doing that, and trying to fight, getting in touch with the mayor and trying to get a meeting with the. I got too much going on this week, so I said no. Anybody else would have jumped at that opportunity.
I'm glad you're involved in the Obama re-election. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do they have any plans for the city of East Cleveland so far as campaigning?
They're doing, what are they calling it? Canvassing. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it uniquely. What they're doing is they have the names of the people that voted in the last election. They don't know, of course, how they voted. And they're calling them saying, did you vote for Obama last time? Will you vote for him again, or will you vote for Romney? And that gives them a chance, I guess, to work out their strategy. Okay. And it's different. And I do voter registration. I let them know that's all I'll be doing. I'm not doing door-to-door. I'm too old.
So is the Obama administration doing voter registration down here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're doing it at Mayfield, and they're doing it at Shaker, I think.
Oh, in East Cleveland.
Oh, in East Cleveland, they're doing it. I do it at Euclid and Superior.
Okay.
I'm trying to, and I don't think that's going over too well. I'm trying to train the ones around me to know that the only way you're successful with voter registration is being where there's traffic. They had me I was told to go to East Cleveland Library. There's no traffic. I got one voter registration. I don't like to waste time. I went up to Euclid and Superior outside Les's store, got 59 like that. We did Euclid High School. The teenagers, fine. You can get, because a lot of them are turning 18. And it's a waste of your time if you go someplace where every once in a while somebody will come by that's unregistered. So you need places where there's traffic. And we're supposed to do Saturday at Euclid and Superior. It's going to kind of, with Mildred's funeral, kind of interrupt some of that. But outside the liquor store, outside the grocery store, I told him I can almost tell an unregistered voter. And it's really funny, it's uncanny. Because you walk up, somebody like you walk up, and I can tell that you're involved. I can tell that you have high self-esteem. You're registered. But the ones that come up there and the hat's cocked one side, and I said, you registered to vote? No, I ain't ready. Come on over here. And I guess I've done it so long, you know.
You know what one looks like. Okay, okay. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or share with us?
Now, who's doing this? Case is doing it?
The Social Justice Institute through Case Western Reserve. So it is part of Case.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they're interested in is the relationship with Case and East Cleveland, trying to open up dialogue to understand East Cleveland. Our part of this is to do a history, a voicing in action to tell us your story, right? But in a bigger picture, we'd like to look at how can we better the relationship between East Cleveland, Case Western Reserve, University Hospital, and that whole area. And I think one of the things that they've been talking about for at least the last 5 years now is they're landlocked. So as they are forced basically to come this way, they want to know the best way to do it without just coming in and strong arming, so to speak.
They have been talking and supposing for years that somebody was going to take East Cleveland over, either Cleveland or Cleveland Heights. That's been conversation for years. I kind of think that's going to eventually happen.
In what way?
Wouldn't be good for the administration unless they would be a part of it. But I think eventually it's going to happen, mainly to get more professionalism. That's the only thing I see making it a plus.
You see it more so Cleveland or more so Cleveland Heights?
Cleveland Heights. But they only want part of it, I keep being told.
That's right. They just want basically the hill, and they would be forced to take that part down to Coventry. They'd be forced to basically take that.
I just hope and I pray that eventually we'll get professionalism there. I don't really see it now. I really don't.
It's definitely a struggle when you want to pay certain positions, key positions where top-ranking professionals are needed. When you want to underpay them, $30,000, that $40,000, that's
no.
Yeah, that's no money for a real 2012 professional.
You can't attract them, no.
You can't attract the type of brain power that you need, the capacity that is required for the positions to move this city forward.
Unless it's such an advantage, because some of the suburbs, they don't get paid at all. Pepper Pike and them don't get paid at all. It's an honorary position. Because let's face it, they don't spend much time doing it. True. Except for council meetings and signing things, they don't. So if Cleveland, East Cleveland becomes so professional that they're doing things, they meet and they are opening like the apartments on Lakeview and Euclid, and they went with the county library. I have a friend that was chairman of the Cleveland Heights Board, and she shared with me the other day all the comments from the libraries around the county about the decision of the East Cleveland Library not going with county. It was foolish. It was totally foolish. I hadn't made up my mind whether they should or should not until I went to the last meeting they had. At the last meeting, they said, if the library remains independent, this is what has to happen. PowerPoint. If the library goes with county, this is what will happen. I didn't even have to think about it. Because first of all, the things that they said had to happen to remain independent were never going to happen. The auditorium wasn't even full. The community didn't even show up. Everything that they had was going to remain there. There was nothing that was going to leave. Salaries, the only thing that I hesitated on is people that were in supervisory positions might lose their position if there was someone in the county that had that like Diane Wilmore is the head of children's. If there was already a children's librarian, she would lose her position. That's the only thing that kept me hung up in the beginning. Because if you're going to get everything, when you go there and there's no magazines, I go to Cleveland Heights Library. All the East Cleveland board members went to Cleveland Heights Library to get library stuff. They don't have a crisscross because they said they can't afford it. And why wouldn't you? And these other libraries, I mean, they wanted them to go to Warrensville and see what Warrensville got. Warrensville County came in, asked them what they wanted, and everything they wanted, they got. The presidential letters that we have would remain. The Ichabod Flewellen would remain, which I'm not satisfied with that at all. He was a personal friend of mine. Nobody goes in there and looks at that collection. It's not people friendly. So it's there again. It still random goes into the fact that it's personal. With East Cleveland, everything is personality driven. I'm in one of Barbara Thomas's meeting, and this guy's sitting next to me. I don't even know him. And when it was his time to talk, he got up and he pounded on the table. Did you know? Scared me to death. Did you know that East Cleveland is getting ready to? East Cleveland Library is getting ready to give your library away. He acted a complete idiot. I said, "Oh my!" I sat quietly. He didn't even know I was a former member. I sat so quiet. So until they get some professionalism, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change.
One of the things you just said, and you said it a while back in a different reference, was the citizens showing up. Now, and the lack of involvement in the citizens. Do you think that that has changed over time in East Cleveland?
Hasn't changed, but they just don't care. If any other community, if there was something on the table as serious as that, everybody would have come. But that's true even of ward clubs and things. Judge Pianca, the housing court judge, I went to his ward club to speak once. And when I got there, I said, they must be having a cabaret party too, because there was all these cars and all these people. And I go, they're all turning out because I'm coming to speak. That's how their ward clubs are. And he got up and he told them what city council, he was councilman at that time, what city council had done that month, what they were going to do the next month. He said, we're going to bust this house for drugs on such and such a street. How many of you are going to go with us when we do it? People volunteered. He'd ask an 18-year-old if there was something he had to vote on. He'd say, coming before council next week is such and such, and how do you think I should vote? And everybody gave their opinion. I was flabbergasted. In fact, I got in trouble because I went back to our ward club, George Forbes' ward club, and George wasn't there. And when it was my turn, I was vice president. When it was my turn to speak, I got up. I said, we're not doing it. I said, we come to ward club, have coffee, and go home. And they tell us one or two things. I said, the ward clubs, and I told them all the stuff that went on, and George walked in the middle of it. He didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, I think, after that. But they become involved. Here, one person says, everybody was on saving the library. Saving what? Saving a library that doesn't have, you can't get copies free. Cleveland Heights Library, you get 10 copies free. Euclid Library, you get 20, I think. 20 or 30 free. They have all kind of stuff. We don't, professional.
Making decisions in key.
But it's personal.
And
one person said, we're not going to let them take. Oh, when I was sitting there, I got sick of the stomach. And what is the library going to be called? Who cares? It's going to be called the East Cleveland branch of County Library. So what? And they're
magazines and books.
And they're eating them up. In the library world, they're eating them up. And they're blaming the school board, and that's who I blame.
East Cleveland School Board?
They're the ones that made the decision not to. And it wasn't so bad they made that decision, but they called the board incompetent, said they didn't, and that was the best board they'd ever had.
The best library board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the school board is just
the school board. The resolution was very mean-spirited, and I would have looked for something better than that because Una's the president, and she's a minister. You know, there's a way to say things, and it was very mean-spirited. They all quit, you know.
I did not know that.
They all quit.
Wow.
The president called me. She said, I'm not going to stay there. She said, it'll ruin my career. That they didn't know what they were doing. They were mean-spirited, incompetent. There was 2 lawyers on the board.
Yeah, the library board. I did hear they quit. Across the street was telling me. Ed Parker. He told me that story. Wow.
They all
He
quit.
didn't give me the details.
And people criticized them. I said, I would have quit too. Because that board was the best board they had ever had. When Charlie Bibbs and them were on there, they fought all the time. Janet Banks was the chairman, very qualified. And then they said that they couldn't be trusted since they all wanted inclusion. They could not be trusted. Well, it was terrible.
Wow. Wow.
But that's East Cleveland.
That's East Cleveland.
That's East Cleveland. The board meetings now last till 11 o'clock.
And it really should last like 45 minutes, and you should be out of
2 hours, hour
Yeah.
and a half.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's not just.
It's embarrassing.
It's not just council, but it's other boards and committees throughout East Cleveland.
And
that
Una's a
need
friend
that.
of mine, and I would hate for her reputation to be tainted by this.
Wow.
We've known each other for years,
Wow.
and they're blaming the school board for letting that happen.
And you know, I remember the fight last election about judges being forced out at a certain age. And
Oh yeah, that was on the ballot.
And I remember speeches about that, and I was kind of torn in the middle on what to do. And I know that's how Una eventually had to step down from East Cleveland.
And she's back now with, I don't know what her position is, but she's back.
Oh, I didn't know she was back. I know she endorsed
I guess she's his bailiff. I don't know.
Oh, yeah?
Because she sits there at the thing.
That would be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know the amount of love and respect she has here in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But I'm a proponent for people like me stepping back and pushing people like you out there.
One of the things we have in our fraternity, which is really excellent, is training for leadership. So train them for leadership and then let them lead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to be here. Even with voter registration, I told them, this is going to be your world. You better get out there and do something. Because the young people don't do it. When Lou talked to that Stay in Cleveland group, he said the same thing I tell them. Because they all, or too many, because you never say all, too many young people blame the black leadership for not letting them in. I said, don't nobody let you in. You have to push your way in. Lou Stokes told how he drove the guy from the Future Outlook League around for years, picking his brain. You have to be in the trenches and learning. But too often they come out of college on Monday and they want a 6-figure job the next Monday. With no background, no.
Okay.
So but I'm a proponent of, I step back, and I think she's seen it. Like me talking with the media or something. Let somebody else that's coming up do it. I don't need anything else on my resume.
Wow. Okay.
I don't want to do that. And I was afraid that was going to open the door, and they were going to ask me to do something else, and then something else, and then,
Before you know it, you're overwhelmed.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. You have a full 9 to 5
Yeah,
schedule.
I'm already too busy.
Well, Ms. Sheats, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us tonight?
No, I think that's...
You have any questions for Jeannie?
I just have 2 quick questions. I wanted to know, what would be an ideal candidate or candidates that you would like to prepare for a public office that you would like to see, any particular, not naming someone, but what would you like a person to prepare themselves to understand our new world? That's be the first question.
I saw that in a young man. He's not coming back here this summer, but Zach. That's a perfect example of a possible Obama, another Obama. clean, wanting to know, taking time to ask questions, you know, and moving through the ranks.
And my second question is, what hurts you the most now about the young people not doing?
I went to Selma, Alabama. I was invited to Selma, Alabama. They have what they call, they honor gentle giants. That's people that were involved in voting in some capacity that maybe never were recognized. And they told me even young people in Selma, the young people were no more interested in voting than the ones here. And they know people that got killed during the march across that bridge. When you see it, and that's something Brad and I really want to do. I want somebody to sponsor a trip to Selma in March one year, just for the Sunday. I was there a whole week. I stayed in the same hotel with Maxine Waters and all of them. I got a scrapbook with all those pictures. They just aren't interested. And I can tell that by my family. My kids passed out literature, worked on the polls, did everything because I made them. But none of my grandchildren are interested. None of them. They vote, but they're not interested in. My granddaughter, I'm going to make her when Obama opens, if they're going to open one, I think it's St. Clair in 105th. But I'm going to make a couple of them go up there and help. But they're not interested. They're not interested.
In my closing question, you had mentioned your family members, just people close to you, just not interested. Where is this lack of not interested coming from? As we know, we look around, we see things need to be done. Where is the lack of not interested coming from?
They weren't there when you couldn't do things. I think that's what it is. They didn't experience. You know, people are more grateful when they know what it used to be like. And they've had too much. I think they've had too much. And so they don't know. They just don't know.
But that's always an interesting question for me. I'm going to turn it back over to my dream team.
Ms. Sheats, that'll about do it for me. I appreciate your time.
So I got to fill this out.
Yes. I will take your mic off of you.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you can click it whenever you.
Today is Tuesday, February the 12th, 2013. We're here for the second interview with Ms. James B. Sheats. She was one of our interviewers last year, and we're so honored to be here with her again, doing a follow-up on some wonderful opportunities she gave us last year. Present we have is Dr. Rhonda Y. Williams. She's the founder and director of the Institute for Social Justice at Case Western Reserve. Also, we have Mr. Brandon King, who's doing our camera person today. And my name is Jeannie Joy, and I have the honor of interviewing Ms. James Sheats for the second time. We want to start off, Ms. James Sheats, just asking you some questions, and we want to be able to see and get your feedback with this being our second interview. We're excited that you are here, and we want to start off with just some general questions. And first of all, we want to start off, tell us about yourself and the history of your family.
Okay, my name is Jane Sheats. You got to put that S on there.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. My father was a native Clevelander, and you don't find too many of them. My mother was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but she was brought here when she was 6 months old. I have only had one sibling, Charlotte, who's now deceased.
Okay.
That's pretty much my background.
Okay. You had mentioned that you were not born here. You came to Cleveland.
Oh, I was born here.
You was born here in Cleveland, and you just had one sibling, correct? Can you tell us a little bit more the reason why your family migrated to Cleveland, or was it East Cleveland?
No, they didn't migrate. My father is third generation Clevelander, which is unusual. And as I stated earlier, my mother was born in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where most of her family was. But she was brought here at 6 months old. So she, for all practical purposes, was a Clevelander.
Okay. So where was your first place or what that you moved to when y'all moved to Cleveland? Can you recall or tell us a little bit about that?
I was born on East 79th Street near Quincy.
Near Quincy, okay, okay. And also with your family, with your mom being in Georgia and your father,
My mother was brought here at 6 months.
6 months, right, okay. So they met, where did they meet?
My mother and father met here in Cleveland.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna time out. Brandon, I'm gonna time out. I want you to start over. We're gonna start from the beginning. The introduction.
Okay. Today is Tuesday, February the 12th, 2013. We have the honor of doing a second interview with Mrs. James B. Sheats, and we want to be able to recap a lot of good, valuable information from our first interview. We do have present today, we have Dr. Rhonda Y. Williams, which is the founder and director of Social Justice Institute with Case Western Reserve. We have the Chairperson here with us, Brandon King, and my name is Jeannie Joy, and I'll be honored to be the host and interviewing you today for our interview. We would like to start off by stating some questions, and the first question is, tell me about yourself and the history of your family.
I'm one of those rare things. I'm a native Clevelander. My father was born in Cleveland. His family came from Cambridge, Ohio, so he's pretty much a native Clevelander. My mother was brought here from Atlanta, Georgia with her mother and father when she was 6 months old. There's not an awful lot I know about their courtship or when they met because my father died when I was 9 months old and my mother died when I was 7. He died from congenital heart, was not supposed to live at birth but lived to be 27. She died from rheumatic fever because it was during the Depression and money was short and doctor care was short. And doctors for years told me that neither one of them should have died.
Okay. We just want to speak about your family. You mentioned your father and your mother. Can you tell us a little bit about what area that your parents stayed in, to your knowledge, and what schools that they attended?
No, as I said previously, I don't know that much about their background. All of us native Clevelanders grew up in the Cedar, Quincy, Woodland area, pretty much from 55th to maybe 105th. That's where most native Clevelanders lived. It wasn't until later that the next move was to the Gold Coast, and the next move was to Mount Pleasant, or that happened pretty much the same time.
So you said your mother died when you were 7. Your father died when you were 9 months old.
Yes.
Who raised you?
My grandmother.
Okay. And where did your grandmother raise you? What neighborhood?
We lived, that's 71st and Central, and then in the 40s, they built the projects on Woodland. And the projects were not built for welfare, they were built for affordable housing at the time. They were beautiful, they were well controlled, they were clean, and people that, some of the disc jockeys from Cleveland and a lot of prominent people lived in those projects. And we moved there in 45, I believe.
So you moved into public housing in 1945.
I think it was 45.
Do you remember the house you lived in before you moved into public housing? Or the place you lived in?
Yes.
What did it look like? What kind of
It was what they called at the time rooming house. It was my grandmother and me and my sister. I later had a sister. And there might have been like 6 different families, and you shared a bathroom, but it too was nice. And it was right across the street, I remember vividly, it was right across the street from Giddings Elementary School, which is also the school that Carl and Lou Stokes went to. They started school there. and that was on 71st and off of Central.
And so you moved to public housing in 45. Were you excited about that?
I think that's the year. I'm not too sure because I was so little. It was in the 40s. It was it was during the war, because when we moved to the projects, I can remember the blackouts during World War II. When they give you a signal, then everybody had to turn all the lights out, had to turn everything off. And I remember as a child being frightened because you had to do that periodically for a drill just in case we were attacked, you know. So I remember that vividly.
Did you have your own room? What did the public
We had 2 rooms. One room was for my grandmother and the other room was for me and my sister. Spotless, you know. At the project at that time had wooden floors. And I grew up in the same area that Carl and Lou Stokes and a lot of other prominent people in Cleveland grew up in that same area.
Did you know them growing up? The
Yes,
Stokes brothers?
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Carl and Lou lived on 46. I left the projects when I was 12 years old because my paternal uncle, my grandmother was very, very strict. And like I tell my grandchildren, I didn't like her until I got to be 40 because she was a very strict disciplinarian. We couldn't do anything hardly but go to church, go to school. She was a cleanliness nut. You had to wash things over and over and clean over and over. And it wasn't until I was 40 that I realized what she was trying to do, and I credit her with whatever I ever became, because I was real friendly and no telling what I'd have been doing if I had not had a disciplinarian as raising me. And I left the project at 12 because I cried all the time. She had me, my sister didn't care, but I cried, you know. And so my uncle went to court, and him and my aunt took me, had me to come live with them at 12. Not 12, yeah.
And you cried all the time because she was a disciplinarian.
Yeah, she was. I tell my grandchildren she wasn't the cookie baking grandmother. You know, good example. If you're washing dishes and you know the water is too hot, and I say, Grandma, the water is too hot. She says, no, it's not too hot. Don't put any cold water in there. Well, it wasn't hot for her because you know she was older and her hands were tougher, and so I just cried. My sister, she talked back. You know, I just cried.
Where did you move to?
With my aunt to 93rd and Cedar.
And what was that like?
That was wonderful. It was in a building owned by Lady Pearl Mitchell, and anyone that knows the history of the NAACP, she was Miss NAACP. Her father was Wilberforce University. Mitchell Hall was named from him. And when you said NAACP, you said Lady Pearl. And my aunt, when her mother died, Lady Pearl Mitchell raised her, finished raising her, and she owned the building that we lived in. And that was nice. I went to Fairmount Junior High when I moved there, and we had a little joke about that. The day I started at Fairmount, one of the teachers the day before had jumped out the window. So they teased me and told me he knew I was coming.
Were you traumatized by that?
By him jumping out the window? No, I didn't know him, you know.
Had you heard about it when you got there? Or?
Well, that was all the talk, because it was the day after.
What was the school? I mean, what was the
It was a
school
beautiful school. It was right in the art museum area. It was right over in that little nook. Fairmount Junior High. It was a beautiful school.
Can you talk about your experiences at the school? Give us a feel for what it was like.
Well, the teachers were naive. Children were disciplined at the time. For instance, the science teacher would take us for walks through Wade Park to look at birds. And he would be looking at the birds and describing the birds and talking about what the birds do, and half of the kids wouldn't be anywhere near him. 2 or 3 kids would be around him. The rest of us would be all kind of places. But he continued to do that, to take us over for the bird walk. But we weren't disorderly, but nobody was paying attention to the birds.
What were you paying attention to?
We were talking to each other, you know. Looking at that time there was a lagoon over near where the tennis courts are. He'd walk all over there with us, and there was a lagoon with boats. And you could take the boats and go out on and they finally stopped that too. It was a beautiful area, beautiful.
Was your school an all-black school or mixed
No,
school?
it was mixed. A lot of Italians from Murray Hill went there.
And how was that?
It was good. The black youngsters sometimes try to intimidate the Italian youngsters, but it didn't work because they were pretty hip too. So it didn't work out too well.
Why was there intimidation? What was the relationship, the racial relationships like then? I mean,
You made friends. One of my closest high school friends was an Italian girl that was at John Hay, and she was tough. And when they tried to bully her, she'd bully them back. And we kept friendship all through our adult life.
what was the tenor of race relations during that time when you were in school at Fairmount Junior High School?
You made friends for the reasons that people should make friends. You hung out with the people that had the same likes and dislikes you did. You know, there was no there was tension. There was tension because of the bullying. I can remember that. There was a lot of I can remember once being very frightened. This one black girl was going to fight this other Italian girl, and half of Murray Hill came over there, and we were scared to death. You know, like I said, they weren't intimidated. You know, they thought they could intimidate them, and they couldn't.
So you all went to the same school, but did you live in the same neighborhoods?
Yeah, most of them lived Murray Hill, and most of us lived around Cedar, 105, and Frank. You know.
What churches did you go to? Did you go to church?
I went to St. John's for years. St. John's was the church that everybody wanted to go to because it had a large teenage. Judge White went there. I don't know who all didn't go there because there's a lot of teenagers. They had a lot of activities. And Judge White, throughout his career, I teased him because he was in my Sunday school class. And our Sunday school teacher was 90 years old. But she was very progressive and funny, and she'd take us and do different things, you know, off from Sundays. And we were like 17 and 18. She'd tell us not to kiss boys, and we'd say, well, can't we just kiss, you know? And she'd laugh, and everybody remembered Miss Hudson, Stella Hudson. Nobody ever forgot her. 90 years old, and she meant an awful lot to us. And Judge White, when he went away to college and he came back, and he was trying to impress her, and he said, we all went out the other night and everybody was drinking, and I just ordered a glass of milk. And for years I teased him about that. I said, what was wrong with getting a pop? You know, but he was, you know, making brownie points with her that everybody else was drinking liquor and he had milk. But that was a very happy period.
What was your relationship like with your aunt? Because you said you moved in with your aunt.
She was, and I talked to my grandchildren about that too. I said, I'm glad she didn't raise me because she was a sweetheart, but whatever I wanted to do, and thank goodness I didn't want to do anything wrong, she was okay with it. I mean, if I came home from school late, it was okay. When I was with my grandmother, well, I was 12 years old, but I couldn't have wore makeup or anything. But with my aunt, she was a beautician. She kept my hair done pretty, and I'd have my makeup on, and you know, I'd started wearing the high heels then. And I told the kids, I said, it's just a difference in having my grandmother's raising and should she have raised me. It would have been two different, you know,
And did she have her own shop? Where did she
Yeah.
do hair?
She had her own shop.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
She had a shop at 83rd and Quincy, and she was there for years. And but she didn't have any children, and she loved me, and you know she loves children, but she didn't monitor like my grandmother would have. You know, my grandmother, we would go out and play, and a half hour later she'd say, "Okay, it's time to come in and read. Take a bath, you know, and read." Where my aunt really, you know, of course, like I said, I was a good girl, so she didn't have anything to really be concerned about, but I could have, you know, because I had more freedom.
What did your grandmother do? How did she
It's really funny, and that's, I tell people when you have elders in your family, take time to talk to them. She told me that she worked for this doctor in Atlanta, and we knew that. She talked about that all the time because she was born, her mother was born to a slave and the master. Her mother was real fair-skinned and had long gray hair when we got up. And my grandmother was dark. My mother was dark, and my father had blonde hair and blue eyes, and he was black. His sister was dark. And Grandma always talked about this doctor she worked for. And I just assumed that she was a domestic. And when she got in a nursing home and you're trying to think of something to talk about, I said, "What did you do for Dr. So-and-so?" Just knowing full well that she was a domestic. She said, "I worked in his office." Because she was a pretty black woman. And she was classy. She had a lot of class. She could have lived in the White House. Even when she got to be, what's that they give when they get older? Senile. When she got senile and I'd go to the nursing home, my husband, he would laugh because she would sit there if she's eating. Until I got 50, this hand can't go anywhere near a table because this hand had to stay in your lap when you ate. And you ate with this hand. And when she was senile and in the nursing home, she would be eating like this. And she said, "I worked in his office." Because she was so classy and so pretty that she was not a domestic. She was a secretary.
You mentioned a lot about how your grandparents raised you.
Grandmother.
Grandmother
Because she was
raised you.
divorced from her husband.
Can you remember back in the day when you was growing up during that period of time that other of your family and other friends was very strict back in the day, meaning strict, it was very disciplined? And would you contribute just your habits and characteristics just for growing up? Like everybody around you was very disciplined?
No, because there was nobody but her and my aunt.
We're gonna pause and then say, you good? You good? You mentioned that your grandmother was very strict, and that was a part of your during the time she was raising you, and you really took value in her raising you. During the time when you were down in the project, did you notice a lot of your friends' parents was the same type of discipline, had the type of disciplined habits that you can contribute to the neighborhood?
I think children as a general were more disciplined then, but no, there was nobody like my grandmother. No. One of my friends, every time she see me, because later when my grandmother got older and sick and everything, I took care of her. She said, "I don't know how you took care of her." She said, mean as she was, because that was because she didn't let people run in and out of the house, you know, like they do now. You know, there were very few people that were allowed to come over to our house and stay, you know.
And would you say back in the time when you were growing up with your grandmother in that generation, it was more like a neighborhood than a community or
Certainly.
a hood now?
Certainly,
Okay.
certainly. Every, you couldn't do too much wrong because neighbors, if they saw you doing wrong, would tell your parent or whoever. Venerine Brandom lived in the court we lived in. The what's their name? One of the lawyers, one of the architects, Madison and Madison. I mean, a lot of people that later became very prominent lived in that area, lived in that block, and we all knew each other, and they kind of looked out for each other, you know.
Do you ever see some of them now
Oh, yeah.
that y'all talk about?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, and state that the neighborhoods were more neighborly than community and hoods, because now it's, instead of they call it neighborhood, they just say hood now.
Oh, there's an article that was written by a guy in the Call Post that I copied that said the climate of the projects then. You know, it wasn't for, now you equate projects to people that are on welfare and don't care and kids run wild and stuff. Then it was a community. Then in the summer they had screen doors. They took them down. In the winter they put storm doors. You know, you couldn't walk on the grass. Now everything, well, it's starting to change again now. The ones down on 55th and Central and stuff are beautiful now.
How do you define community?
I define it as people that share, not running out of each other's house, but share experiences. You're my neighbor. I know your children. I know your husband. I know your grandmother. And there's very little of that now. Community is having something in common. You know, we didn't have television, so when Joe Louis was fighting, everybody would have the radio on listening to Joe Louis. When Amos and Andy came on, you could hear Amos and Andy coming from the radios in all the houses. One of my girlfriends, Carl Stokes' mother, was getting rid of the piano, and they knew that she played piano, and they gave her the piano. It was caring about each other, knowing each other, you know. Too bad it's not.
So you went from Fairmount Junior High School to, where'd you go to high school?
I went from Fairmount, then my aunt moved. She moved to an apartment because she got a divorce and she moved to an apartment. I went to Brownell Junior High, which was on 14th and Carnegie. And she stayed there, and then she moved again. I graduated from the 9th grade there. I went to Kennard Junior High with Earl Preston and all of them, 7th grade. I went to Fairmount 8th grade, and I went to Brownell the 9th grade. So you were asking me about Carl and Lou Stokes. So I knew them when I lived there, but my close friends, all of us that grew up together, they lived there with them the entire time they were growing up. So they knew them very, very well. We all grew up in the same spots.
When you said, what time frame would you state that your memory, when you were very close to the Stokes family, what year? Can you give us a time frame?
No, I got closer to Carl and Lou after I became an adult. When I left the project, you know, they were all still young and stuff, and they hadn't started in their careers or nothing. You know, we were just children. I hooked back up with Carl when he started running for office. Carl and Lou. Carl was always real personable, and you know, we were closer to him than we were to Lou. And Lou was much older. I think Lou's 85 now. He's about 5 or 6 years older than I am. Carl was kind of rough, so a lot of us weren't allowed to hang around with Carl. You know, Carl dropped out of school, and then he went to the service. And when he went to the service, he got some sense, and then he came out and went to college and everything. He wasn't really that desirable when he was, you know, he was kind of fast and stuff, so.
When you mentioned being down in the central area, give us some time frame. What year, guesstimate, early, what year?
I was down there Till I graduated from high school. I graduated from high school in 51, 1951. So from childhood to 51, I was in that general, everybody was pretty much. My relatives, when the Gold Coast opened, some of my relatives moved there. And I would go visit them. But as of 1953, I've been in Glenville. I've been on the Gold Coast. I married in 53. And my husband had lived there all of his life. He was there when it was all Jewish. He was only black kid in his class at Doane Elementary School.
Would you say 2013, today, present, compared to 1951, do you think the structure of the projects has changed, or the structure is still the same and it's just some difference in the way people live there?
It took a bad turn there for a while. You know, it was known as a place that was full of crime, and it still pretty much still has some of that. And people didn't care how they lived. You know, it was okay to be nasty and dirty and throw stuff out on the lawn and stuff. But now it's changed. They built, Frank Jackson and them built all those new structures, and it looks really nice down there. And so I think it's changing somewhat.
What year guesstimate you would say a time frame you stated the change came about from not good and bad, but just a change when it started a bend in the road?
I don't know. Probably 80s. Maybe it started when they started building new structures. And I think it's not too much the fact that they were in the projects. The years that we were in the projects, there was a lot of control. If you destroyed the property or did something it wasn't, they would write you up or threaten you or something. Then it got to the place where everybody did whatever they wanted to do under the administration that they had. But now I think it's back more in control again, where they have people patrolling and they, you know, tell you if you do something. And I don't think it's the structure. I think it's an awful lot of that. The tenants are on public assistance, or, you know, there's single moms that have to work and have children that are pretty much left on their own. So that contributes to it.
I want to go back to your high school moment. You graduated high school in 1951. Tell us about what it was like going to high school with John Hay.
Loved
Was it, again, a mixed population, racially,
No.
economic? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I loved John Hay. I went to John Hay. They didn't really want blacks at John Hay. John Hay was the best commercial high school in the country. They really, and they weren't too cautious about saying that. When I was going to high school from Brownell, they looked at your grades. Well, I had good grades. And they told you, I heard from other students, they tell you, the ones that didn't have good grades, I don't think you'd be happy at John Hay. So I went to John Hay, and my first semester there, no, it's my second semester there, Dr. Burns's wife, I think her name was Cynthia, was the clerk. And she saw me in the hall one day, and she called me in her office, and she said, you are so pretty. She said, I want you to work in the office. And so I was the first black, I get so tired of being the first black. I was the first black girl to work in John Hay's office. And my responsibility was, when you were late to class, you had to line up. And I had to take your permanent record card. And I was taking shorthand. And he'd say, he'd dictate, the assistant principal would dictate, late to class, and whatever the situation was, whatever they said, the reason they're late. And then they give them, at that point, a pass to get into class. You couldn't get in class if you were late unless you had this pass. And then after the third time, the next late to class, second time, give them a pass to class. The next time they were late, your permanent record card would say, late to class the third time, first period class taken away. And the only regret I have, I loved shorthand, but some girl, they were so strict. Some girl was in the 12th grade, and she failed shorthand, and she wasn't going to be able to graduate. And I dropped shorthand, but he didn't know it. And I continued to take shorthand every morning for him. And he'd say, Jane, how's your shorthand going? I said, oh, it's going fine. But after the third tardiness, the first period class was taken away, and you had to make it up, the next semester or whatever. And he would, at least once a month, tell me that he wasn't prejudiced, because everybody said that he was prejudiced. And he said, Jane, I am not prejudiced. Mr. Welton.
And what'd you think?
It was the time of and I tell young people now, all that was going on then. The very first job I was to get after graduating, I went in and the man said, addressograph, multigraph, and he said, now John Hay not only educated you book-wise, they told you how to dress, they told you how to fix your hair. I mean, they controlled your life, for interview. They controlled your life. And the first interview I had, addressograph, multigraph, I went in, and the man was grinning from ear to ear that he hadn't been able to find anybody that could operate that machine. But since you graduated from John Hay, and since you know all the other machines, addressograph, multigraph, and all, I can train you. And you can start Monday. He told me how much I was going to make. He told me when my vacation was going to be and everything. I left out, and I was supposed to go to Cincinnati to visit an uncle. And I had to call him and tell him I couldn't come because I had a job and I had to start Monday. Before I got home, when I got home, he called me and told me someone came in that could operate that machine. And then I remembered the whole time I was being interviewed, the white women that worked there were coming and looking in. And when I left, they probably jumped all over him. And I knew I was dressed right. I had everything I needed to have for him to have given me that job. So that's the difference. Then you just say, oh, well, now you sue him, or because he didn't say, I'll let you know. He said, you're to start work Monday. But we found out from Mr. Cook, from Culbert Cook, that after so many blacks started going, the woman, Miss McBride, that was in charge of getting you jobs, instead of her sending them to the gas company and the telephone company and what they did to the white girls, she was sending the girls to babysit. Women were calling in and getting girls to come and clean their house or babysit instead of, shorthand and going to the businesses.
You mentioned a story about your diploma.
Oh, that was, my diploma was on a black folder, and it was sealed down. And over the years, I kept up with it. And one year, it came apart, and I turned it over, and on the back, it had all the different subjects, and it had your grade average for that subject. And mine had all D's, and I was an A student. In fact, I took a test once. Sophie B. Wolf was my homeroom teacher, and she loved me. And we took a test once, citywide test, and I got a grade higher than Susie Tradiak, which was our smartest girl at John Hay. And my friends just laughed, and I can remember Sophie B. Wolf saying, these tests are really not accurate. And when I saw that, but it was 20, 25 years after graduation, if I had just, but it was sealed. It was sealed on this black, and I just wonder how many, had I went on to college or something, that would have impacted me.
That's what I was going to ask you. Who saw that? I mean, were those the grades they were distributing to people when they asked for your high school transcript?
That would have been probably, I'm just wondering. If I had just been aware of it earlier, I would have, Culbert B. Cook would have fought it for me, because Culbert B. Cook, who later, he was very prominent in the educational world. He was a counselor and everything, and he wanted me to be the president of the United States. He just had so much confidence in me. Even as an adult, Culbreth would call me. I remember he called me once, and Jane, I want you to speak to so-and-so and so-and-so about the Board of Election. I said, I've been away from the Board of Election for 10 years. I said, I'd have to research all the new stuff. He said, I know, but you'll do it. And he had, you know, that's how much confidence he had. And he was the one that told me what they were doing to the, but just, that's so mean, you know. The law class, our law teacher, he was a lawyer, and sometimes he'd be called away. And he'd have me teach the class, because law I just soaked up. You know, I'd read it once and I had it. And that's just so mean. I just wonder how many other people they did that to. One day when I have time, I'm going to go to the Board of Education and just research that and see. Because those teachers at the time, Sophie B. Wolf, I remember, I think it was in law, I got an 89 or something, because they had grades, and not ABCs, they had grades, numbers. And I got 89, I think, on a test, and she told me, you could do better than that. You know, that's how they were about, you know, you had to work up to your optimum. She said, and I knew I could have done better than that. I probably didn't even study and got the 89. So I certainly wasn't a D student.
Were all your teachers white?
Yeah. Because, you know, then they couldn't be married, you know, they couldn't.
And Susie, what's her name, Susie?
Tradiac.
Yeah, was she white?
Mm-hmm.
Were there a lot of black students in the school? Was majority white school?
Almost all white.
Almost all white.
Mm-hmm. Almost all white.
When you mention about your teachers and your school was so strict, that still carry with you today, that characteristic, correct? And when you mention also about the grades and you didn't know that you had that low grade, it seemed like they would have pulled you to the side since they had this prestigious image.
Oh, I was graduating. Those grades were on my diploma.
Correct.
That was cumulative for the whole 4 years.
Correct, but
Inaccurately so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But with them having such a prestige name and very well known, and with you having a low grade, which you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
At that
Oh, you
point.
couldn't stay at John Hay and fail. If you were at John Hay and you got a bad grade, you'd be gone.
Easily.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, this one girl, she failed shorthand, you know, and in the other school with her being in the 12th grade and everything else is fine, they'd smooth her through, get her out, you know, give her some extra work or something. She failed. She couldn't graduate. She was crying and everything. And I'm dropping shorthand because I'm doing good now, but maybe I get bad when, you know. No, John Hay didn't tolerate no. The story I tell, and I think I told it on the other interview, our typing teacher came by one day and my nails were so pretty and long. And she came by one day and she looked at my nails and she went to the desk and she got her scissors and she came back and she cut all 10 of my nails. And my grandchildren said, "What did you do, Grandma?" I said, "Watch her cut them." They didn't. If you failed something, you just have to go back and do it over.
You said at that time.
A grade, yeah, you wouldn't have failed. Mm-mm.
Have you been up to John Hay lately, the high school, or visit the high school?
Yeah, when they redid it.
Okay. And how did you feel about it?
It's beautiful, and they have a good reputation now, you know, but they had an excellent, you know, they had all kind of, you know, they talked about John Hay students. They said all the John Hay girls were yellow, and I mean, John Hay we were elite, you know. You graduated from John Hay, you were elite.
And what street is it on?
107th.
Okay.
Cathedral Latin at the time was right across the street from it. So John Hay was predominantly girls, and Cathedral Latin was all boys.
And what was it known for?
Business.
Business. With the business, was it a focus point or just general business?
No, everything. Anything, typing, shorthand, bookkeeping, whatever. Then they had one, I forget what they called it, that wasn't as structured. I forget what that was. Retail store, I think it was.
You had mentioned shorthand, a lot of points that you mentioned with shorthand. Was that something that you really enjoyed, and do they use it today?
No, no. In fact, I just gave my shorthand book away. No, they got, they tape it and stuff now, or, you know, no.
Was John Hay a school that you had to go to because it was a neighborhood school?
No.
Or was the school you chose?
You had to choose.
And why did you choose John Hay then?
Because I was always crazy about clerical, you know. When I left John Hay, I was typing 100 words a minute. I'm still the best typist I know. I was applying for a job at the little part-time job at the Jewish thing on Noble, and you had to fill out the thing, and it wanted to know how many words a minute you typed, and I knew 45 was acceptable, so I put 45. And when I got ready to leave, and she looked over my application and everything, and she said, okay, she said, I'll give you a call. She said, now you know we do give you a typing test. And I said, okay. And so I was telling my daughter, she said, you know why she said that, don't you? She didn't think you could type 45. I said, if I had thought that's what she meant, I'd have said, yeah, give it to me now. Because I type probably 60 words a minute now without any errors. When I retired and I went back to the county and worked for 6 months, the girl said she had to give me a typing test. I said, okay. I typed it twice, the copy twice with 2 errors. I said, so, but that was John Hay, that perfection. You had to be, you had to be on top. Like I said, you take Cleveland out, put Ohio in, you better not be able to see. You took addressograph and multigraph, and the only difference is one you use your foot and one you use your knee. They were really strict.
So you graduated high school in 1951 and you married in 1953.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you meet your husband?
At John Hay.
At John Hay.
He was a star football player, star fullback. He went to Glenville, and the girl talked him into coming to John Hay, and then he came to John Hay and met me.
And you all married in 53,
Mm-hmm.
and you lived in Glenville at that point?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We lived on the Gold Coast. His parents had 2 homes.
What is the Gold Coast?
105.
Can you, what does it mean?
That was, you were going on up. You lived on the Gold Coast. From 105 and Superior north to the lake was Gold Coast. Home ownership, beautiful homes, mostly Jewish. In fact, when we got married and we lived in his parents, they had a home on Tacoma. No, Hathaway, first house on Hathaway. And the man next door, the Jewish guy next door, told me everything my husband did as a little boy. And he went to Doane Elementary, and in his homeroom, he was the only black kid. It was all Jewish. Beautiful area. Beautiful.
Was your husband fair-skinned?
No, he was brown.
He was brown.
Mm-hmm.
Was the family fair-skinned?
Mm-mm.
Did they have any problems living
Mm-mm.
one of the few families in the
No,
Gold Coast?
Jews were very acceptable. Every house just about there that was sold, a Jew owned it first, Like the guy that invented Superman and stuff, that was the culture there. Because they, at that time, started moving out to Moreland and Shaker, and, as more blacks moved in, they moved out.
Why do you think that was?
White flight.
What does that mean? Can you explain a little bit?
Probably in some cultures, when they see there's too many blacks, they know it's time to move out. They don't mind 1 or 2, although it shouldn't have mattered because you had to be able to afford the houses. I never did. Can we take a break?
You had mentioned concerning explaining more about the Gold Coast, and it seemed like you were so happy about letting us know your view of 105 and Superior and talking about the neighborhood. What was the basic highlight that you enjoyed about living in that neighborhood?
When you moved from where we were to where I was brought up, and you moved to the Gold Coast, you were moving on up. It was a lovely area. Most of the black professionals that came from Central in that area moved to the Gold Coast. Or like Lou Stokes' family, they moved to Mount Pleasant. But the Gold Coast at that time was much more desirable. The houses were nice. There was a lot of nice stores. It just pains me when I go on 105 now and see what's happened. There were nightclubs. There was nice stores. Safe. Safe. It was safe, you know.
Would you say that 105 was the downtown in the Superior area? It was booming with restaurants, store more valuable, a lot of life in the area.
A lot of life, yes.
A lot of life in it compared to today in 2013.
Yeah, there's nothing there now.
That word that you use is the Gold Coast. That was just a general overall stating that you was moving up.
That's what they called it. 105 area was known as the Gold Coast.
Is that something that you know that it was something that was in writing or that particular area as a landmark?
It's always referred to it. Just, you know, like Cam's Corner is referred to as Cam's Corner, and Collinwood area is referred, that was the Gold Coast.
When you say about the business, speak more about the businesses there that you can remember on 105. Was it more small business chains? How was the atmosphere about the business there?
Yeah, it was small businesses. There was a drugstore. You don't see that now. There was a drugstore on the corner of 105th and Superior. There was corned beef place that everybody went. When you went out on a date, you had to go by Perkles on your way home and get a corned beef. And there was the Mercury Lounge, and there was the Tijuana, and the barbecue places. And that's where, outside of Cedar, that's where most of the blacks went when they wanted to go out to party. They went on 105.
Tell me about the Mercury. What's the Mercury place?
It was the Mercury Show Bar.
Tell me about that.
It was just a bar, and they had entertainment. Tijuana, when the night Tijuana opened, it was gorgeous. In fact, that was the first bar I ever went in, and I wasn't 21. I was 20, and they had me rehearsing when I was born and everything before we went in, so that nobody even asked me.
Who was the we? They had you rehearsing.
They had me rehearsing. So the group that I went with, because some of them were already 21. When were you born? November. And just in case somebody asked, but it was a beautiful place. You know, they were like supper clubs. They had entertainment.
And you said as black people moved to the Gold Coast, the neighborhood started transitioning.
Yes, not real bad though. It wasn't until later years, because I moved. We got married in '53, and it maintained, I think, until the riots, until the Glenville riots. That
Can you
ruined.
talk about that?
It's a sad part of our history. I was working at the time at Bobby Brooks. I was supervisor of data processing. And the night of the Glenville riots, I worked from 4:30 to 1 in the morning. And I was on my way home, and they weren't letting anybody into the area. Carl Stokes was the mayor. The firemen, when the fires started, they called the fire department. They told them to let their mayor piss on it and put it out. And at that time, Carl Stokes had a group of men with cars with police radios, so they could hear every call that came in to police or fire, so they would respond. And they burned 105, burned their own businesses. Burned their own businesses.
Why? What caused
And
the
it's,
rebellion that you remember?
It started with a bar on Lakeview and Auburndale. and I forgot what the fight was about, but the black nationalists shot one of the police, and then all it just broke out. And by that time, that was 50 something, but we bought a home in 1955. We were going on 22 years old. We bought our home in 1955, and the fight started at the bar on Lakeview. A policeman got shot, and when the policeman got shot, the other policeman came in, and they burned almost every store on Superior, furniture store. At that time, that was 124th. I was living at 124th off of Superior. They burned, there was a furrier, there was an antique store, there was a drugstore, there was a dime store, there was a bank, there was a supermarket. Anything you wanted was on that end of Superior before the riot. And once the National Guard, when they brought the National Guard in, well, getting back to the Bobby Brooks, the night the riot started, I was on my way home and they weren't letting anybody in. I had to go stay with my aunt. They weren't letting anybody into the area.
So that was in the midst of civil rights, civil rights activism, and also black nationalism, black power. What was your view on civil rights movement and the black power movement? Were you involved in that?
No, they destroyed their own, which made no sense. The black nationalists at the time were going in the beauty shops and pouring water on the women that were getting perms. They go in the beauty shops, and at that time, George Forbes was militant, and he tried to talk to them. You know, he wore dashiki and stuff, and he tried to talk to them. They messed up their own. You know, listening, I was just, when they did the Malcolm, the thing on Coretta and Betty, and I said, one of my regrets is that I didn't read Malcolm's book until he was dead, because media led us to believe that he was just a loudmouth nobody. And after reading his book, I was so sorry I didn't know what he stood for before he died. And we destroyed our own. That area was beautiful. When I moved to my home on 124th, there were no fences, there were flowers, we were the third black on the street. It was mostly Italian. And after the riot, during the riot, the National Guard, my children, it was funny, the first part of our street was single-family homes and two-family homes. The end of the street was apartment buildings. The kids in the apartment buildings and the people that didn't own their own homes, they were going up to the dime store, and they were coming out with baby dolls and paint and ladders, and they were going in the furniture store and walking out with televisions, and it made them look like animals. When we found out later, the owners said, take what you want, because they're going to file an insurance claim. A hardware store across the street from where we were, it didn't sufficiently burn, so one beautiful sunny day, we see fire coming out the roof. He probably went back and tried to finish it off. And my kids couldn't understand how come they couldn't go up to the dime store and get what they wanted too, because they were coming down the street with the baby dolls and the paint and anything they wanted. But after that was over, there was no more hardware store, no more furrier, no more.
Were those businesses owned mostly by African Americans or whites?
No, whites. Whites. Because the street itself was, there was only 3 blacks on the street in 55. And like I said, we had no fences, it was just beautiful. And then after the riot, everything changed.
And so the Grenville riot, that was the late 60s.
Hmm.
And at that time, it was still predominantly white in the area.
No, it was starting to be black then. Hmm. When we bought the house, most blacks didn't know anything past Lakeview. Lakeview was the end of your consciousness, and we were going to buy a house because at the time I was working for GI Loan. I was working in the federal government, and we wanted to buy a house and had saved. My husband worked at General Motors. I worked at Internal Revenue, and we had saved and wanted to buy a house, and they were building in Warrensville. And the guys, every time they bring the plans in, I said, "What about this house?" "No, Jane, they're not good." Then they bring some more houses. "Nope, they're poorly built." So we got tired, so we went to where Huff Norwood was a bank and a realtor and stuff. We went there, and she showed us the house on 124th. And the owners were an old Italian couple, and they thought it was so cute. We were 22, and we were buying a house. And but we didn't even know about that area at the time. And someone just told me recently that they moved the sign. They had moved the sign that was East Cleveland at one time from Lakeview. But East Cleveland started at 125th. And what was strange during the riot, not a match fell on 125th. They burned all the way up to 124th. And East Cleveland on the border, they had people sitting. Not a match went over to 125th.
So were you involved yourself in any civil rights organizations? Any black liberation, freedom?
No, just NAACP, that was all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because of Pearl Mitchell. You know, during that time, we had to because of Pearl.
And you said you had three, how many children did you have?
Three girls.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And how old were they?
Oh, during the,
Mm-hmm.
no, they weren't. My oldest daughter, she was born in 53.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, 57. The next one, 61.
So they were young when the rebellions,
Mm-hmm.
they were still young when the rebellions were taking place.
In fact, my youngest daughter said she got tired of living in that same house because some of her friends had lived in several houses. She said she was tired of living in the same house.
Talk about the neighborhood that you moved into. This is the house you bought at 22 with your husband. You were at the IRS. He was at GM. Was in East Cleveland.
No, it was
In East
Cleveland.
Cleveland?
It was Cleveland. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I didn't move to East Cleveland until just recently.
Okay, until this week. So you were right on the border
Of East Cleveland.
and East Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was, through my career, once I got to the Board of Election, I was in East Cleveland a lot for political stuff.
Okay.
But I always lived in Cleveland.
Always lived in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But East Cleveland then was, you didn't spit on the street. You didn't, you whispered when you went through East Cleveland.
I want to just follow up with you and just ask you a question. Can you think back to the earliest memories of East Cleveland and tell me what life was like then? You stated that you moved in East Cleveland what year?
Oh, I've only been in East Cleveland since '03. Since I sold I was in my home for 53 years. And once my husband was dead, and he's been dead 18 years now, once he'd been dead like, I forget how many years, I said, I'm tired of all this house.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lovely house. I just put a new deck on. But I said, I don't think God wants me to spend my retirement calling plumbers and carpenters and somebody to shovel snow and somebody to cut grass. So I made the decision then to go into an apartment.
What was your focus point of moving in East Cleveland, and the area that you're in presently, is that one of your top choices?
No. Being a realtor, I didn't want to go to East Cleveland, but I was looking for an apartment, and I looked at 10 apartments, and the one that offered everything I wanted, and my daughter, one of my daughters, that was her first apartment. That's the apartment that I'm in was an icon. A lot of Some football players have lived there. Some pastors, prominent pastors. I mean, it has a history. It's a beautiful building, and we're trying now to bring it back to what it used to be.
So you did a lot of business in East Cleveland, and you decided to move in East Cleveland in 2003. So you knew the area, you knew the sense of the area, and being in real estate. So what did you find that was the most attractive
About the apartment?
about the apartment besides the people?
Well, it was strictly the apartment. The apartment has lovely big rooms, and the view is phenomenal. I'm on the Cleveland Tenant Board now, newly appointed to that board, and the director, when she came up, she was just, the view, just, everybody that comes, I had a painter come to give me an estimate on painting the rooms, and he just stood there and looked at the skyline and stuff, you know, so the size of the rooms, and every time I get mad at our manager, I tell him, I don't have to live here. I have a decent retirement. I can move probably practically anywhere I might want. I said, but this suits me because it's around my children, my grandchildren, my church. Everything I do is in this area. So I have to fight to make sure this apartment stays maintained.
So there's several other nice buildings in East Cleveland.
Not really. Not really. Superior is full of apartments, but they're terrible in terms of what goes on in them. I talked to the people that, a couple of them, they say the police are there every 3 or 4 days. You know, the one on Terrace doesn't have a good, I think Crystal Tower is the only other one that has a decent ownership and stuff.
And you said that you came to East Cleveland to do business. Was that for
Political.
political business?
Mm-hmm.
So you knew when the city was not just mayor and city council at that time.
City manager.
It was city manager.
Yeah, me and May Stewart was the city manager, and me and her were, she was city manager at the same time I was chairman of the Board of Elections, so we did a lot together. We did a lot of television together.
So you remember the change from
Mm-hmm.
city managers to current?
Well, it changed with city manager, with May Stewart in there. That era wasn't, they were starting to do what they're doing now. It was run very well when Judge Adams and them were there. Very well. I mean, you didn't do anything wrong in East Cleveland and get away with it. People were afraid of it. It had a wonderful reputation.
Can you mention some of the names that were powerful people at that time?
No, Judge Adams is the only one that sticks out. He's the only one that sticks out.
And at that time, of course,
He lived in East Cleveland. He lived in one of those buildings that's now vacant on Superior, one of those 2 buildings that are vacant that now they're talking about doing something with. And they just had a reputation. People were afraid of them. My husband, 6 of them went to the Browns game one Sunday, and they're coming through East Cleveland, and one of the guys had a beer. And cops stopped him. They went to court, and they gave all of them a ticket for $60-some. And my husband, they were all mad. They were what they were gonna tell him. And he said when he heard the other fines and stuff, they just shut up and paid their $60.
So you said some of the business you did in East Cleveland, or what brought you to East Cleveland really was the business that you did in the city. Because the house you lived in was on the Cleveland side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that business was? You were working for the Board of Elections and just
Yeah,
how that got you
for
involved with East
hearings,
Cleveland?
yeah, I'd have to go. When I worked for community development, we had to go, and this is something that I've repeated often. I was working for community development, and we had to go there. I was over the HUD program, and we would have to, I had the 33 cities I'd have to go and find out what they wanted with their HUD funds. And I had to go to East Cleveland, and the guy that was to go with me was a white guy from Parma. And when he heard it was East Cleveland, he was frightened. He said, Jane, he said, you're going, aren't you? I said, yeah, I'm going. And I told him at that time what was going to happen when we went to city council, because I knew all of them. I told him what this one was going to say and what that one was going to say. Davis was the mayor at the time. And when we left there, I took him up to Crystal Tower to see Bob Johnson, who was a friend of mine's apartment. He had the penthouse at Crystal Tower. And when he saw that penthouse, he was just, I said, no, East Cleveland is not to be frightened. You don't have to be frightened. But the reputation that East Cleveland had gotten by then, just frightening.
What was your job at the Board of Elections? What did you do?
I was chairman of the board.
And for people who don't know what a chairman of the Board of
Okay,
Elections does.
and this is going to be my new soapbox. There are 88 counties in Ohio. Each county has 4 election officials, 2 Democrat and 2 Republican. The only way you get on the Board of Election in your county is the party has to appoint you, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They had not had Virgil Brown, the Republicans appointed him in 1972. And he was the first black ever appointed to a Board of Election in the state. Then they appointed Arnold Pinckney to a board seat. Arnold left to run for mayor of the city of Cleveland, and they needed to replace him. George Forbes, Arnold Pinckney, Lou Stokes, and company were very active in the Democratic Party then. That's when the caucus started. The caucus started because Lou Stokes said, we're not going to vote for you just because you're Democrat. We're going to vote for whoever's going to take care of us. If we're not going to be inclusive, we're not going to vote for you. So when it came time to replace Arnold, they insisted that the person they appoint be black. It was between me, George Forbes suggested me, and they wanted the coroner, Samuel Gerber, who'd been the coroner for years, very well known. They wanted him. George Forbes and them said, no, we want a black. So he met, and I found all this later, he met with all the blacks and he told them, I want Jane Sheats, because I was working in his campaign. And I found out from one of the, what is her name? She told me later that George Forbes had told her that he was going to appoint me to something because I could sit on any board they had. Mary Rose Okar. She said, Forbes told me last year that you was going to get on a board because you could be on any board they had. So George met with the company and he said, I want Jane Sheats. Everybody agreed, but Ike Thompson, who was the state rep at the time and was a friend of mine. No, George, I can't go with Jane. He said, why? He couldn't figure out why. He said, okay, everybody go home. Tomorrow, come back and bring me somebody. So the next day they came back, they couldn't think of nobody. So I was going to get appointed, and George Forbes had Ike make the nomination. He was the only one that was opposed. So it's a very powerful position. The Associated Press in 2010, a white reporter wrote an article, and I'm going to share that with you, wrote an article talking about the lack of black election officials. At this time, we only have 1 in Ohio. Now, mind you, 88 counties, time a possibility of 4. And at this time, there's only 1, and that's the one here in Cuyahoga County. And she's absent in action. And I'm going to work on that. I gave Chris Redfern a copy, and I gave Budish a copy.
So there's only 1 black now,
election official
in 88 counties. And when you came into the position, had there ever been a black?
There's never been but
chair?
2 at any time.
So
no, there'd never been a chair in the country. And it was really strange. We knew that I was the first in the city, county, and state. Ichabod Fluellen, the black historian, he said, you're the first in the country. And I kind of felt, Ebony and Jet came to pick it up. And Anita Polk was the person that did the correspondence for Ebony and Jet. And after I didn't talk to Ebony and Jet and I called her, I said, what happened? Because I wasn't that concerned about it. She said, Mr. Forbes told them that not to pick it up because it would give you the big head.
So you were the first chair of the Board of Elections in the whole country. First black chair.
And then I thought about it. I said, it makes sense. Blacks don't get on the Board of Election. And that's what this article says. The article is about the lack of blacks on boards of elections. And then each county tells how they had one at one time and didn't last. And then it also tells how important boards of elections are.
Why are they important?
Because you make decisions for all elections. And let me tell you something that everybody's dead, so I can talk about. The attempted recall of Dennis Kucinich. It was on a Sunday in August. Me and my husband and his friends were going to California. When they said that the election was going to be on Sunday in August, and I said, we're going to be in California. Mr. Garofoli, who's a lawyer with practice in Florida and Ohio, he was the former chairman before me. He left to run for county commissioner. He said, Jane, just go on to California. He said, it's okay. I said, but I know you have a case in Florida. Don't matter, just go on, go to California. When I thought about it, I said, the plain dealer will eat me up. The Democratic mayor facing recall and the Democratic person isn't there. I wasn't the chairman then. Is not there. I said, no, I didn't share that with anybody. That's my job. So I went. It's paper ballot, X's. I get there. There's no Mr. Garofoli. There's 2 Republican members. I never gave it a thought until years later. The only purpose of the board members was to say, if there was a question, is this X for or against? That's all. Ain't no Democrat there, just 2 Republicans. I didn't think anything about it until years later when I remembered when I came back from California, he came in my office and you would have thought I killed his mother. Were you there for the election? Yeah. I told you you didn't have to be there. But I didn't say, well, you weren't there. I didn't say anything. But I can only imagine. I don't think there would have been anything to mess with the vote. I think the reporting would have been. That would be a big thing. And I shared that with Mr. Kucinich years later. I said, you didn't get recalled because I was there. But that's how important election officials are. I can only imagine what would have happened, if I had not been there. Not only that, the Board of Election at that time was there was lack of diversity. My first election, little kids, 8, 9 years old, were running around. And I said, what are they doing? They were delivering the vote to the board members, and they were getting paid $9 an hour. There wasn't a black youngster. I put the first black in the key room. I put the first black Democratic booth official supervisor. Since I was friendly, they would talk to me. And one of the cleaning women, I was there one night, and she told me that the head of that Democratic booth officials was retiring. So I thought, So I had somebody for that position. Again, Mr. Garofoli, when it happened, he went upside. Why did you put her in that position? What? Because I did it before he did, So it's important. It's important.
And what was your specific business in East Cleveland? I mean, what brought you a lot to the city here?
Ward meetings, ward club meetings, and I did, for years, I did for the county chairman ward leader elections, where the council people would choose the ward leader under Cohen, John Cohen, who was the Democratic chairman. I did a lot of them. And one of, I forget her name now, she was very, very, very active. She's ward leader in East Cleveland. We had a case to come before the Board of Election that the person was ambidextrous, and she used both of her hands to sign her name, so the signature looked totally different. And a complaint came before the Board of Election that it wasn't her signature, and we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was her signature, that she had used opposite hands. And the ward leader in East Cleveland was bad-mouthing me. See, Jane doesn't have any power down there. They let her get away with that. So I went to East Cleveland and discussed it. So mostly political stuff.
And was the ward leader African American, white?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
African American.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget her name. I should see how quick people forget, you know, because she was.
So by that time, East Cleveland was majority African American.
Mm-hmm.
Was transitioning to African American.
No, it went almost totally African American. I'm trying to think of the years.
Can you describe how you saw that change happening? What kind of signals or signs did you see? What was it that?
I think there again, when the white flight, you know, when people started moving out, started being confusion, you know, in the government, city government, because there was a real odd thing. I was chairman of the board of managers of YMCA, Glenville YMCA, and Willie Price was the director, and he was also councilman in East Cleveland. And they caught him. Did you ever hear his name? I forget what he did wrong in East Cleveland. He did something wrong, and they were charging him. I don't know whether they were threatening some time or whatever. Anyway, the YMCA fired him because of the controversy that was going on in East Cleveland. And I got word on the block that he told everybody, he was trying to explain why he got fired, and he told everybody that Jane Sheats got him fired from the YMCA. And I called Bert Gardner crying. I said, Bert, Willie's telling people that I got him fired. He said, don't correct that. He said, that makes you strong. You so bad. You so bad you told the YMCA to fire him, and they fired him. So, because it was a big, I don't know what he did, I forgot.
You were on a lot of boards.
Not really, because I don't like boards. I'm on the YMCA, the Auto Club,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm now on the Cleveland Tenant Organization Board, but I avoid boards.
Mm-hmm. Over the course of your life,
Mm-hmm.
you've been on plenty boards.
Yeah.
The AAA board, the YW.
Glenville Y. And
the
always-
election board, the library board, the lottery.
It's always because somebody else, I was telling Deidre that, I never say I want to go on a board. Somebody, the AAA board, I love. And I've been on there. You have to come off when you're 70, so I had to come off. But they didn't want me off, so they put me on the the children's outing board, offering outing board. They supply money for things that the orphanages don't get money for, you know, for field trips and extra stuff. So they even changed the rules, because the rules were that you couldn't be on that unless you were still a trustee. But AAA now has bought up almost every auto club in the country, so it's huge now. So they got rid of the corporate board, and they just have the trustee board where people from everywhere are on that. So I'm still on that. Accidentally ended up on the tenants board. Glenville Y, the vice president of Cleveland Trust, Bert Gardner, he was the first black vice president of Cleveland Trust. He told me to go get on that board because it was a board of businessmen, and he said they didn't know what they were doing, and go get on the board. So I went and got on the board, and the next year they made me chairman there. Because what they were doing was, during board meetings, they were talking about how they were the first black at Morehouse and what the Browns did Saturday, and it was just unstructured. So I did. I went there, and Voinovich appointed me to the Regional Workers Adjustment Committee, which we went all over the state talking about when they were closing mental hospitals and things, telling the employees the rights they had and the benefits they could get. And when I retired, they talked me into being the neutral chair. Our neutral chair had quit. So they said, Jane, you got time now. We want you to be the neutral chair. So I did. I was the neutral chair for that. But I really don't like boards. I try to avoid them.
And you were doing all of this while working. Was your job at the Board of Elections, or was that, okay, so that was your job. And you were on the board and raising your family?
Yeah. Well, chairman of the Board of Elections, you only work about 5 days a month. Board of Elections only meet when they have an agenda, and they save up. They get complaints about elections, and when they get the complaints, they meet. With the media, during the time I was chairman, it wasn't an easy job. We had the attempted recall of the mayor, we had the Muni light fight, we had the lottery scandal, we had a whole lot of important stuff. I worked very hard. I studied. If I had a hearing coming up Monday and it was about this, then everybody I met that week, what do you think about it? I listened to the newspaper, I listened to the radio accounts, the TV accounts, read the newspaper. One of my glorious moments was we had a full room, attorneys and everybody, and they were arguing about some case, and the lawyer was giving me his opinion. And I said, sir, that rule has been changed. And the legal counsel for the Board of Election was trying to make his way up there to tell me. He said, and they said, Bob Hughes got back to his office and he said, find that damn, he didn't even know. But I worked very hard. And one of my friends, her husband, one night was, every time they'd talk about it on television, they'd say, and Bob Hughes said. This one night they said, and Bob Hughes, the chairman of the Board of Elections, said, and my crazy neighbor called and said, Bob Hughes is not the so-and-so chairman of the Board of Elections, Jane Sheats is. The guy said, one moment. And he came back, he said, yes, you're right, Jane Sheats. He said, well, next time, say that. And even with the media, Paula Slimmick, I walked up to her one day and I said, is there a reason why when you discuss the Board of Election on television, you always quote Bob Hughes and you never ask me anything? She said, oh, I wasn't aware of that. And I said, well, I am. So the next hearing, which was terrible, U.S. Labor Party accusing Democrats of voting from vacant lots and abandoned buildings, and I mean, it was rough. And in the midst of the discussion, she said, and Mrs. Sheats, and I gave her a half-hour answer. And then from then on, she would, you know, kind of, it wasn't an easy job, but I loved it.
Can you talk a little bit about that case? This was a labor case?
U.S. Labor Party during, I forget whose election it was, but they accused Democrats of winning because they were voting from vacant lots and abandoned buildings. Any complaint that comes before the Board of Election is sent to the inspection department, of which Charlie Bibbs was a part. And they would have to go out and investigate and come back with the facts. And then we'd make a decision. And even Fannie Lewis, who was very argumentative to all the other board members, truly respected me. We had a case where a blind man came into the polling place and she said he wasn't blind, and they allowed somebody to go in and help him, and he wasn't blind. And I said, Miss Lewis, the only person that can make that judgment is an ophthalmologist. and we don't have an ophthalmologist on staff at the Board of Election. And the election law says that if you are sight impaired, that you can do one of two things. You can have someone of your choosing go in with you, or you can have a Democrat and Republican poll official go in with you. And he did that. Hit the gavel, dismiss. And she didn't say anything to me. Now, Bob Hughes and them, she told him one time, she said, Mr. Hughes, I know you don't like what I said, but I'll give my life for Ward 6 or whatever her ward was. Later on, Bob Hughes said, yeah, and I started to take it.
What was the impact of all of your work on your family?
That's what I pride myself in. My family came first. During my political career, when Carl Stokes became mayor, George Forbes was going to be the law director. And he came over to our house at 3 o'clock in the morning. We were out of town, and when we came home, he came over. And he wanted me to take his seat as councilman. And I said no, because I have children, and if there's something going on for the city and something at my children's school, I'll be at school. I never miss one PTA meeting. I never miss one baking of cookies or anything. And to know that I achieved it, my oldest daughter, we were talking about a babysitter that I had, and she didn't remember me working. Because when I come in, I worked, we finally found out we couldn't get good babysitters, so my husband, he worked at General Motors during the day, and I worked at Bobby Brooks at night. So one of us was there at all times. And when I come in from Bobby Brooks at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd cook some pancakes, whatever I was going to have for breakfast, and put it in foil and stuff. So they had breakfast every morning. They had lunch, and I cooked dinner before I go to work. So my family came first. It had to come first. I wasn't a career, my career, and then I'd see what I could do for you all. Fridays, I washed everything and ironed everything up for the rest of the week. So I was able to do both of them successfully.
And what role did your husband play?
He, after they got to be teenage, he started cooking. And there's some regrets. They were taking piano lessons, and by me working nights, he would come home and eat and get on the couch and go to sleep, and they didn't practice. And I didn't learn that for a while. They told me after they got grown. So, but he was there with them. And our backyard, 150-foot backyard, was fenced, and they had a whole swing set and everything. And 2 of my girls stayed behind there and did what they were supposed to. The other one, she'd go on her bike and she'd be gone. And I'd catch her. I'd call home at night and I'd catch her every time. But no, my family came first.
And was your husband very supportive of the work that you did? Were there conflicts over work or anything?
No, he went along with it.
What did he do at GM?
He worked first at Euclid Road Machinery, and then General Motors bought him, and they moved to Hudson, and he was in the parts department. I talked him into, very brilliant man, I talked him into, every time there was an opening in the office or in the higher position, I'd encourage him to try to get it. So he finally got tired of me doing that, and he took the position, and he hated it. And it was shortly after that that General Motors lost the place, and he told me, see, if I'd stayed there, he liked being in the parts department where you come to work, do what you got to do, and go home. He didn't like management.
Was he political at all? Was he involved in any politics?
Just with me,
civil
with
rights?
George. He loved George Forbes and Lou Stokes, and he liked it. To me, these people were, the Forbeses, we were personal friends. They were at my house, we were at their house, we went to the same church, we were close. But to me, all the people that I worked with were just associates. Bob Hughes, the Republican chairman, made me come to a party he was having at his house, and people would have sold their children to get to Bob Hughes's house. He said, Jane, we're having Valentine party. He said, I want you there. I said, well, I can't, I got a wedding. He said, well, it's not going to last all night. I said, yeah, but the reception might. He said, well, I want you there. So we went. But I didn't make the mistake of trying to think I was their equal or, you know.
When you spoke about East Cleveland, what was your experience like from coming from Cleveland to East Cleveland and being so powerful as a woman? Is in that area? Did you go in there with a different perspective?
I stayed away from the political scene in East Cleveland when I came. I don't like it. I don't like dissension. As far as I'm concerned, in politics, you don't have to be friends. You have to, like we did on the Board of Election. Tony Garofoli did everything, would put out a contract on me, but you would never know it. You know, when we're out, hi Tony, hi Jane, that's politics. That's what I've been trying to get across to the ones that I talk to in East Cleveland. You don't have to like each other. You have to work together for whatever the job is. And disagreements should be had in the back room.
I want to stay on the point of the area about the Board of Election that you served as a chairperson. What your life as a chairperson, you made decisions. What type of decision would you say was a glorious decision that was made and is still used today?
Decision I made at the board?
Correct.
For the employees and things?
Period. Any decision that was made is still used today?
None. When I see what has happened at the board, when I was there, any employee that had a problem could come see me. Any Democrat that had a problem could come see me and I'd solve it. That has long since been gone. Long since. When I worked the 08 early voting, they were coming to me in droves complaining about things. I said, I don't have any power here. Mayor Perk's son, who was slightly retarded, he would come up at least once a month. Miss Sheats, I said, okay, we'll work it out. Most of the gains have been lost.
Okay. So is it safe to say now that there is a big change now in the board election?
And there was, and now there's going to be even another one because now there's the director that's been there for so long has left, and they'll be getting a new one.
And with the board of election, it's a area that is strong and is needed because it makes decisions, but a lot of people still don't understand that whole industry about what the board of election, how powerful it is. Would you agree?
Right, they don't know. When you tell people, when I say I chaired the board of election and I was the first in the country to chair a board of election, that means nothing to them. They don't realize how powerful. And this young lady that wrote the article in 2010, I called her and I asked her, I said, are you black or white? And she's white. And she knows the importance, and it really bugs me that we don't know the importance, because there might not be a Republican appointed, we don't care. But certainly, because Democrats, according to Bob Dykes, black Democrats are the ones that bring in the votes. We're the ones that vote, the black Democrats.
And most of the people who worked under your leadership, were they appointed or elected?
Well, the Board of Election, they're all employees. The board is the power. The director is the day-to-day facilitator. The director answers to the board.
And is it safe to say you've seen a lot of changes in the Board of Election with the director, several of them leaving, and the position having a lot of turnover?
No, what I'm unhappy about is the lack of activity from the one sole black election official we have.
Meaning, can you expand more about?
She's absent. I doubt if anybody knows who she is. And the religious community is really upset about it. They haven't liked the others after me, because they have felt that it's our responsibility to make the public know what the Board of Election does.
So, in saying that, to me, the Board of Election is not user-friendly.
In a way, there's some things that need to be corrected, and maybe now they will be. I've had complaints that the training for booth officials is not what it should be. My daughter, she works in the booth every election, and she has to retrain her people. They're not properly trained. And when I mentioned it to someone at the Board of Election, they said, don't touch that, because the woman that's over the